Perhaps you have once picked up a seashell on the beach, held it to your ear, and listened to the very soft whispering inside. People often say that it is the sound of the sea, but in reality, that sound is simply an echo of the surrounding environment, captured and amplified by the shell. And yet, how strange, such a small object can make us pause, listen, and remember a place somewhere very far away. Tonight, let us try to look at a seashell in a different way. It is not merely a beautiful object left behind on the sand. It was once a home, a suit of armor, a structure that a tiny living creature slowly built throughout its lifetime. Every ridge, every layer of minerals, every color, and every crack may preserve a small part of the story of life, the ocean, and time. Some shells once lived in seas that disappeared millions of years ago. Some shells preserve clues about the temperatures of ancient oceans. Some creatures build their shells from incredibly simple materials, yet create structures so intricate that human beings are still amazed by them. And perhaps, if we look at this through the perspective of Carl Jung, the most fascinating thing is not simply what lies on the outside of the shell. It is the question that the shell awakens within us. Why are human beings so drawn to small things that contain such enormous stories? Perhaps it is because, deep within, we are also like these shells. On the outside, we are merely small forms within a vast world. But inside each of us are memories, traces, layers of time, and stories that not everyone can see. Tonight, we will slowly journey through 100 relaxing facts about the world of shells, from how a living creature builds its own home to the chemical secrets hidden within every layer of a shell, the ancient oceans, civilizations that have disappeared, and finally, the day when a shell becomes sand and returns to the sea. This is Channel Name, a place where we explore profound scientific stories in a gentle way, so that you can satisfy your curiosity while also allowing your mind to slowly relax before drifting into sleep. So, lower the lights just a little, relax your shoulders, and let the sound of imaginary waves carry you toward a distant shore. If you enjoy journeys like this, please subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Now, close your eyes, because lying on the beach before us, there is a small shell, and its story has only just begun. Entering the mysterious world of shells. Try to imagine a truly quiet evening. Outside, the sea is slowly breathing through small waves. There are no more voices, no hurried footsteps across the beach. There is only the pale light of the moon falling upon the water. And somewhere, among the damp grains of sand, a seashell lies quietly. Perhaps tomorrow, someone passing by will pick it up, look at the patterns across its surface, and place it in their pocket as a small gift from the sea. But if we pause for a little longer, if we look at it not only with our eyes but also with our imagination, the shell suddenly becomes something entirely different. It is no longer an inanimate object. It is the final trace of a creature that once lived, grew, faced hunger, currents, predators, and the endless changes of the ocean. It was once a home, and it was also once armor. There is something deeply beautiful about the natural world. The things we often regard as small can sometimes be created through processes of extraordinary depth. A shell does not appear fully formed from the very beginning. For many mollusks, it is built layer by layer, little by little, from materials that the creature can obtain from its surrounding environment. Over time, one layer settles upon another. One small curve is followed by another. A structure that may seem simple gradually becomes an intricate construction, strong enough to protect a soft body from the outside world. And when we think about this, we can begin to look at a shell with different eyes. It is like a home that a creature does not rent, does not buy, and does not discover somewhere in nature. It builds its own home. This makes the shell one of the most beautiful images through which to contemplate life. A tiny creature, without hands like ours, without machines, without architectural blueprints, can still create a structure with a shape, thickness, and arrangement suited to the life it is meant to protect. From the perspective of Carl Jung's psychology, this image invites us to think about a very familiar symbol: the outer shell and the inner world. Human beings also have their own shells. We have the way we dress. We have our voices. We have our social roles. We have the way we appear before other people. Jung called one important aspect of this structure the persona, the social mask that human beings use when they enter the world. The persona is not necessarily false. It helps us adapt, communicate, and live alongside other people. But if we forget that behind the mask there is also a vast inner world, we may begin to identify ourselves entirely with our own outer shell. And the seashell reminds us of something similar. A shell protects the life within it, but the shell itself is not the entirety of that life. It is only one part of the story. While the creature is alive, the shell grows together with it. Changes in the body, the environment, and the rhythm of life are reflected in its outer structure. Then one day, the creature dies, and the shell may remain on the sea floor or wash ashore. The life has left it, but the traces of that life remain, and this is precisely what makes a shell so special. It is a kind of material memory, not memory in the human sense of remembering an afternoon or a face, but memory recorded through matter. Growth layers can reflect the process of development. Damage to the shell can reveal a difficult period in the creature's life. Changes in the chemistry of certain shells can help scientists study the environment in which the creature once lived. In other words, a shell can carry within it traces of a time that no living memory remains to remember. Imagine a fossilized shell lying deep beneath layers of rock. It may have been there longer than the history of many civilizations, longer than ancient cities, longer than languages that have disappeared, longer than the stories human beings once told one another. Someone might walk past it without knowing. A child might pick it up and think it is nothing more than a beautiful stone, but to a geologist or paleontologist, it may be one small piece of a world that has disappeared. Because the Earth does not preserve history only in books, history also lies within rocks, within ice, within sediments, within fossilized trees, and within these tiny shells. A shell can tell us that this place was once a sea. A fossil can reveal that a land that is dry today once lay beneath an ocean. Layers of shells accumulated over millions of years can contribute to the formation of limestone and sedimentary layers upon which human beings now stand. The wonder lies in this. A creature that lived such a small life can leave behind traces that survive unimaginably longer than the creature itself. Perhaps this is also why shells can make us feel so peaceful. They do not hurry. They do not try to prove anything. They simply exist, one layer at a time, one day at a time. If a shell can be created little by little in this way, perhaps we do not need to understand our entire lives in a single night. Some things need time, some wounds need time, some questions need time, and some hidden parts of the mind only begin to speak when we become quiet enough to listen. In Jung's thought, the journey of self-discovery is not a race either. It is more like a gradual process of moving deeper within, recognizing the parts of ourselves that we had never seen before, and then learning to live in harmony with them. Just as a shell is formed from countless small layers, human beings are also shaped by countless layers of memory, experience, love, loss, hope, and fear. No single layer can tell the whole story, and no single day can explain an entire human being. So, the next time you see a shell lying on the beach, try to pause for a moment. Do not simply ask how beautiful it is. Ask yourself, what creature once lived inside it? How many seasons did it experience? How many times did it witness the tides rising and falling? And how long had it been lying here before I saw it? Perhaps you will never know the exact answers, but that very uncertainty is what makes it even more beautiful, because the shell reminds us that this world contains far more stories than the eyes alone can see. A tiny object can hold traces of thousands, even millions, of years. A tiny creature can leave an imprint that lasts longer than a human lifetime, and a shell lying quietly upon the sand can lead us to think about something very large. Time does not need to be loud to become magnificent. It only needs to continue flowing, layer by layer, season by season, wave by wave. And perhaps, as night falls, we too can learn from the shell how to slow down. We do not need to know what tomorrow will bring. We do not need to finish everything. We only need to be here, in this moment. Because just as the shell records the story of a creature through countless tiny layers of minerals, each day, we too are quietly creating the story of our own lives. And if the shell is a trace of life that has already passed, then the next question becomes truly fascinating. How can such a tiny creature build such an intricate home by itself? To find the answer, we will go a little deeper into the process through which a shell is created, the place where biology, chemistry, and the extraordinary laws of nature meet. How living creatures build their own shells. And from the image of a shell lying quietly on the sand, we can take another step deeper into its story. Because if a shell is a trace of life, then the most natural question is, who built this tiny structure? And how was it built? Try to imagine a very small creature living on the seafloor. It has no hands, no hammer, no blueprint drawn on paper. And yet, day after day, it quietly creates a sturdy home around its soft body. No machinery, no sound of construction, only seawater, minerals, a living body, and a process so slow that we can barely see it with the naked eye. If you are lying quietly tonight and listening, imagine that somewhere beneath a distant sea, this process is still taking place. A new layer of material is being added to a shell. A curve is continuing to extend. A tiny creature is quietly building the home it will carry throughout its life. In many shelled mollusks, a special structure called the mantle plays an important role in this process. The mantle is a soft tissue that covers much of the body and lies directly beneath the shell. It is not simply a protective layer of tissue. It is one of the most sophisticated construction workshops within the body. The mantle controls the chemical environment right where the shell is formed, supplies the necessary components, and regulates how mineral crystals are arranged. Put simply, if the shell is a home, then the mantle is the invisible craftsman who works day and night to repair, expand, and complete the structure. One of the most important materials in a shell is calcium carbonate. This is a mineral that is very common in nature and can exist in several different crystal forms. Within the organism, calcium carbonate is used to create the hard structures of the shell. But the wonder does not simply lie in the presence of the mineral. What is remarkable is that the creature can control how that mineral crystallizes and is arranged, creating structures with the strength, shape, and characteristics suited to its way of life. Think of a house built from extremely tiny bricks. If those bricks were simply thrown into one place, they would form a chaotic pile. But if they were arranged according to a particular pattern, they could become a wall. In the shells of many mollusks, biomineralization is organized with a similar level of sophistication. Organic components of the body can help guide and control the formation of minerals, so that these tiny crystals do not simply appear at random, but are organized into layers and complex structures. And then the shell begins to grow, not by expanding evenly outward in every direction, but usually by adding material to the growth region, especially along the edge of the shell. Each time a new layer forms, it settles beside or above the older layers. Over time, these tiny layers accumulate into a larger structure. One day may bring nothing particularly noticeable, A week may still seem to bring no obvious difference, but after many months, many years, the shape of the shell has changed. It is a very gentle lesson about growth. We often think that change has to be something dramatic, a powerful decision, a turning point, a moment that sends life in an entirely new direction. But nature often tells a different story. So many great things are created through changes that are too small to notice from one moment to the next. One layer, then another, and another, until one day, something small has become a structure. If we look at a shell this way, we can see it as something like a book that the creature writes in minerals. Each layer is part of the process of growth. Growth lines can reflect biological rhythms and changes in the environment. Injuries can leave traces. Changes in color, shape, or thickness may be connected to the conditions in which the creature lived. That is why a shell is sometimes described as a mineral biography. It does not tell its story with words. It tells it through layers of matter. And perhaps this is also where we can see a beautiful connection with the way Carl Jung thought about human beings. Jung devoted much attention to the deeper layers of the psyche, to things that do not always appear clearly on the surface of consciousness. A person in the present always carries traces of what they have experienced. Memories, experiences, fears, love, choices, and even the things that were never spoken aloud can all contribute to the person we are becoming. A shell is much the same. Its surface is the present, but beneath that surface lies history. If you look closely enough, you may begin to see the small curves, the layers resting upon one another, the changes that are almost invisible. No layer exists entirely separate from those that came before it. Just as with us, the present does not emerge from nothing. It is built from everything that happened before. And then there is something else that makes the shell particularly fascinating: the spiral. Many shells have spiral forms, and this shape appears across many different groups of organisms. The growth of a shell can create beautiful spiral curves, as each stage of growth expands according to a particular pattern. These forms remind us of mathematical principles that appear throughout nature. But the beauty here does not necessarily mean that every shell follows one single perfect formula. Nature is more complex than that. The final shape of a shell is the result of interactions among genetics, developmental biology, materials, the environment, and evolutionary pressures. Mathematics is not something imposed upon nature from the outside. In many cases, it appears as a language that helps us describe the patterns and principles that nature has quietly followed. A curve may reflect the way an organism grows. A new layer may expand from the previous one. A simple structure may repeat itself many times and create an extraordinarily complex form. And when we see a spiral shell beneath the moonlight, perhaps what we are looking at is not only beauty, we are looking at time transformed into shape. Each spiral is part of the process of growth. Each new layer is another day that has passed. Each ridge is a sign that this creature once lived. It does not need to speak. It does not need to explain. It simply lies there and allows its structure to tell the story. Perhaps that is why shells possess a beauty so different from objects created by human beings. An artificial object can be designed to be perfect from the very beginning. But a natural shell often carries its own unique imperfections. A scratch, a broken line, a slight change in color, a distorted section left behind by life. And it is precisely these traces that give it meaning. If you are listening to this story tonight as you prepare for sleep, try thinking about yourself in the same way. You do not need to be a perfect version of yourself, completed in a single day. You are also growing layer by layer. There are peaceful days. There are difficult days. There are experiences that leave marks. There are things that once caused you pain but later became part of your growth. Like the shell, you do not need to erase every line of your past in order to become yourself. They are part of your story. And as you gently close your eyes, remember that somewhere beneath the ocean, a tiny creature may still be continuing its work. It is not in a hurry. It does not know that it has to finish everything in a single night. It simply adds one more layer, and then another. And in this way, time gradually becomes shape. But if a shell can preserve the story of the very creature that created it, then the next question is even more wondrous. Can a shell preserve the story of the entire ocean in which it once lived? And from here, we will enter another chapter, a place where tiny layers of minerals begin to tell us about temperature, salinity, seasons, and ancient oceans that disappeared long ago. The shell as the ocean's diary. And from the story of how a living creature builds its own shell, we can go a little farther, toward a truly beautiful idea. A shell is not only the home of a creature, but sometimes also a diary of the ocean. Imagine a shell lying quietly on the sea floor, in the deep blue darkness that human beings rarely see. Seawater flows over it. One season follows another. Temperature changes, salinity changes. Food is sometimes abundant and sometimes scarce, and the light at the surface of the water is sometimes strong and sometimes faint. The creature inside continues to grow, little by little. And throughout this process, the surrounding environment unintentionally leaves traces upon the very shell that the creature carries with it. The creature may not know that it is recording anything. The ocean does not know that it is being recorded, but time continues to write. Quietly, as a shell grows, new layers of material are added, and in some species, the chemical composition of these layers can reflect environmental conditions at the time they formed. This is one of the things that makes shells so valuable to science. A shell cannot speak in human language, but the chemistry within it can tell stories that living memory has long since forgotten. Imagine that you discover an ancient shell lying within a layer of sediment. You cannot ask it where it once lived. You cannot see the sea that it once belonged to. But by analyzing the chemical components preserved within its material, scientists can search for clues about ancient environments. One important tool is the study of isotopes. Elements exist in different forms called isotopes, and the ratios between certain isotopes in biological materials can change according to environmental conditions. For some types of shells, particularly carbonate structures, scientists can analyze isotopic signatures to infer conditions such as temperature or the source of water at the time the shell was formed. Not every shell preserves a perfect record, and interpreting that record requires many factors to be carefully considered. But these tiny signatures can help us look back into a world that has disappeared. The remarkable thing is this: a creature only a few centimeters in size can become a natural recording device for the planet. It has no clock, no thermometer, no instrument for measuring salinity. And yet, throughout its life, it responds to its environment. And those responses can be preserved within its material. Seen this way, a shell is like a diary, whose writer does not know that they are writing. Each layer is a page. Each chemical change is a sign. Each growth line is a line on a timeline. And even more remarkably, these growth lines can help us see the rhythm of life. Many organisms have periods of faster and slower growth. Environmental conditions, food availability, temperature, seasons, or biological changes can influence the rate at which shell material forms. When these periods are preserved over time, a shell can carry within it a sequence of traces, somewhat like the rings found in a tree trunk. Not every line corresponds exactly to a day or a season, and scientists need to study each species very carefully in order to interpret them. But in some cases, growth cycles can provide information about the biological rhythms and environmental conditions that the organism experienced. Imagine a clam living through many seasons. In spring, food becomes abundant. In summer, the water grows warmer. In autumn, conditions begin to change. In winter, the rate of growth may slow. All of these things can leave very small signs within the structure of the shell. The creature never writes. This is winter. It simply lives. But that very life creates a trace. And hundreds or thousands of years later, human beings may be able to read that trace. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful things about studying nature. We do not always find answers in things that are large and dramatic. Sometimes, history lies within changes so small that the naked eye cannot recognize them. A thin layer, an isotope ratio, a growth line, a structural change. Each individual sign may be very small, but when we bring them together, they can form a story. And sometimes, that story extends far beyond the lifetime of a human being. A fossilized shell can survive for millions of years. During that time, the sea may change its position. Land may rise into mountains. Seas may retreat. The climate may shift from warm to cold and then change again. Species that were once common may disappear completely. But the shell remains there, silent, without complaint, without trying to prove anything. It simply preserves one small part of the story. And when human beings discover it, we have the opportunity to open another page of the ancient earth. This is also where the image of the shell becomes especially meaningful when placed beside the reflections of Carl Jung. Jung devoted considerable attention to memory, symbols, and the deeper layers that human beings are not always consciously aware of. One important idea within his thought is that we do not live only in the present moment. What we have experienced continues to exist in many forms, sometimes very quietly, within the way we perceive and respond to the world. A shell carries a similar principle. It exists in the present, but it is created by the past. The newest layer lies on the outside, but it cannot be separated from the layers that came before it. You can see the present surface, but to understand the entire shell, you need to understand the history beneath it. Human beings are the same. When we look at a person, we often see only their surface, the way they speak, the way they smile, the way they behave. But behind all of that may be years of experiences that other people cannot see. A very small reaction can sometimes come from a story that began a very long time ago. A fear can have a history. A silence can have a reason. A habit may once have been a way for someone to protect themselves. And just like the shell, we do not need to feel ashamed of these layers of history. They are part of the process through which we become who we are. Perhaps that is why, tonight, when you think about the ocean, you can imagine that beneath the surface, millions of tiny creatures are continuing to live and grow. Each shell is quietly recording a very small part of the world around it. Temperature, water, season, time, life. And then, one day, a shell may die, sink to the seafloor, become buried in sediment, and remain there for a very long time. It may pass through eras in which no human being remains alive to witness them, until one day, millions of years later, a hand touches it again, and history awakens. That is the wonder of fossils. They do not truly transport us backward through time, but they allow us to read the traces left behind by a world that once existed. An ocean that disappeared, a climate that no longer exists, a creature that became extinct, a coastline that now lies beneath what is today dry land. All of these things can be revealed through tiny pieces of matter that time has preserved. And as you lie quietly in the darkness, perhaps you can think about this in a very gentle way. We often believe that time carries everything away, but that is not entirely true. Time also preserves. It preserves within rocks, within ice, within trees, within sediments, and sometimes within a small shell lying on the sea floor. The shell does not know that it is telling a story, but it tells one anyway. And the next story will be even more fascinating, because if every shell can record something about the environment in which it once lived, then its shape must also carry some kind of meaning. Why are some shells thick and heavy? Why are others as thin as paper? Why do some species carry sharp spines, while others have smooth surfaces? Perhaps every shape is an answer. An answer that evolution has written in matter. And in the next part, we will slowly explore the astonishing shell designs that help living creatures survive in an ever-changing ocean. Amazing shell designs that help creatures survive. And now that we know a shell can preserve traces of the ocean, we can look at it once again, but this time not as a diary, but as a blueprint of life. Imagine a rocky shoreline as night falls. Waves continuously roll in, retreat, and return again. To us, it is simply a peaceful scene, but for a tiny creature clinging to the rocks, every wave can be an enormous force pulling against it. Wind, currents, predators, changes in temperature, and competition for food can all become challenges. And yet, amid all these movements, these tiny creatures continue to survive. They do not have the strength of whales. They do not have the speed of dolphins, nor do they have the ability to run away. Instead, they have something else. Body designs shaped through the passage of evolutionary time. Some shells are thick, some are thin, some are smooth and glossy as though polished by hand. Others are covered with spines, ridges, and raised patterns. At first glance, they may seem to differ only in appearance, but behind each shape, there is often a story of adaptation. In nature, beauty rarely exists simply for decoration. A shape may help defend against predators. A structure may help reduce the force of waves. A thick shell may protect the soft body inside. A thin shell may allow a creature to reduce the material and energy costs required to build it. In other words, every shell is answering one simple but profoundly important question: how do I continue to live? Let us begin with a tiny creature that often lives attached to rocks, the limpet. A limpet has a low, cone-shaped shell. And what is remarkable is not only its shape, but also the way it lives. It often clings tightly to the surface of a rock, using a powerful muscular foot. When waves crash over it, rather than being swept away, it presses its body close against the surface and holds onto its shelter. Some species of limpets can even create remarkably strong attachment through their muscular foot and the structure of the surface where they make contact. The low shape of the shell also helps reduce, to some extent, the direct impact of moving water. Try to imagine a dry leaf lying in the middle of a stream. With a strong current, it can easily be swept away. But a low object lying close against the surface of a rock experiences very different forces. The limpet seems to have discovered a very simple strategy. If you cannot run from the waves, become part of the rock. It is a small idea, but a profoundly meaningful one. And when viewed through the perspective of Carl Jung, it evokes a beautiful image of human adaptation. We often think strength means resisting everything, but sometimes strength does not lie in fighting the current with all our power. It lies in understanding our circumstances, finding the right position, and knowing when we need to hold ourselves firmly in place. The limpet does not defeat the ocean. It simply finds a way to live with the ocean nearby. Another creature follows an entirely different strategy: the mussel. A mussel does not rely simply on the shape of its shell to resist moving water. Instead, it has structures resembling tiny threads called byssal threads. These threads are produced by the creature's body and help attach it to rocks or other hard surfaces. If the limpet says, "I will stay tightly against the rock," the mussel seems to say, "I will create threads to hold myself in place." Byssal threads are a beautiful example of how living organisms use biological materials to solve mechanical problems. They must be strong enough to hold the animal against waves, while also possessing a certain degree of flexibility to reduce the impact of sudden forces. Once again, nature does not necessarily choose the strongest solution. It chooses the solution that is appropriate. And then we encounter clams, creatures with two shells that open and close around their soft bodies. When conditions are favorable, the two shells can open, allowing the creature to interact with its environment, filter food, or carry out necessary activities. When danger appears, muscles that close the shell can pull the two halves together, a very small movement, but behind it lies an entire system of biological mechanics, two shell halves, a hinge, muscles, tension, and precise coordination. Together, they create a living door. Perhaps this is one of nature's most beautiful images, a body that carries its own protective door. Human beings build houses and then have to return home, but a clam carries its home with itself. When all is peaceful, it opens. When danger comes, it closes. And here, the shell is no longer simply a layer of protection. It becomes part of the creature's survival strategy. What is fascinating is that there is no single type of shell that can be considered the best for every environment. A very thick shell may provide greater protection, but building it requires materials and energy. A thin shell may be lighter, but it may also be more vulnerable. Spines may make a creature more difficult to swallow or help disrupt its body shape in the eyes of a predator, but they can also increase the cost of construction. A smooth shape may be suitable for certain environments, while ridges or complex structures may be advantageous in others. This is precisely what makes evolution so remarkable. It does not create one perfect design. It creates compromises that are good enough for life to continue. A shell, therefore, is like a solution to a problem. The problem may be, how do I avoid being swept away by waves? How do I defend myself against predators? How do I protect my soft body? How do I conserve energy? How do I live in an environment that is constantly changing? Each species solves the problem in its own way, and perhaps this allows us to look at ourselves with a little more gentleness. In life, we often wonder why we are not like other people. Why is that person strong in that particular way? Why am I so sensitive? Why can someone else move quickly, while I need more time? But when we look at nature, we see that there is no single shape designed for life. Some creatures survive by holding tightly. Some survive through flexibility. Some build thick protective layers. Others choose thinner shells. Not every difference is a flaw. Sometimes, it is simply a different solution to a different circumstance. Jung was deeply interested in the process through which human beings become themselves. And if we borrow the image of shells as a way to reflect upon our own lives, perhaps we can say that each person must also find the shape that fits their own journey, not in order to become invulnerable, but to learn how to protect the soft and precious part within. Because the most valuable thing about a shell is not how hard it is that the life inside it can continue. So tonight, as you lie down and allow the final sounds of the day to slowly fade away, think of those tiny creatures on the rocks, a limpet clinging to the surface, a mussel held in place by its byssal threads, a clam closing its natural door against the moving water. No creature is exactly like another, yet they are all doing the same thing, finding a way to live. And perhaps that is one of the gentlest lessons the ocean can offer us. You do not need to have the same shell as everyone else. You only need to find a way to protect what is most precious within you. And from shells created to protect life, we will move into an even stranger story. Because not every creature builds its own shell. Some species instead use the shells of other creatures. Some turn an abandoned shell into a new home. Some carry their armor on the outside of their bodies. And some forms of shell are even hidden inside the body itself. Once again, the ocean is preparing to show us that in nature, even the very idea of a shell is not as simple as we once imagined. Creatures that use shells in unexpected ways. And now that we have seen shells as blueprints created to protect life, perhaps it is time to expand the idea a little further. Because in nature, a shell is not always something we find on a snail or a clam. Some creatures carry their protective layer directly on the outside of their bodies. Others possess a kind of armor formed from their own skeletal system. And there are creatures that do not build their own shelter at all, but instead find an abandoned shell and transform it into a home of their own. There are even shells that exist inside the body, quietly carrying out a function that the naked eye can barely see. This reminds us that nature is never limited by a simple definition. The same need to protect life can be answered in countless different ways. Let us begin with one of the most familiar creatures, the turtle. When we watch a turtle slowly crossing the ground, we often think of its shell as simply a layer of armor resting on its back. But the reality is far more remarkable. A turtle's shell is not a backpack that the animal carries around. It is connected to the turtle's skeletal system. The bony structures of the shell include parts that have developed and transformed from the ribs and structures associated with the spine, creating a unique protective part of the body. In other words, a turtle does not step outside its body to take shelter in a house. The house has become part of its own body. This is a beautiful image when we look at it through the lens of Carl Jung. Human beings also tend to build invisible shells around themselves. Some people develop an appearance of strength. Some become emotionally distant. Some always act as though they do not need anyone. Some say they are fine even when, inside, they are exhausted. These protective layers are sometimes formed through old experiences, through moments of pain, or through the need to feel safe. Jung was deeply interested in the way human beings construct the persona, the social mask we use when entering the world. The persona is not necessarily false. It is a necessary part of life. But if we forget that behind the mask there is also a vast inner world, the protective layer can become a cage. The turtle tells a different story. Its shell is not there to hide the being inside. It is part of that being itself. And perhaps the lesson here is not that we should remove every layer of protection, but that we should understand them. Some protective layers once saved us. Only when we understand where they came from, can we know when to hold on to them and when we may gently set them down. From the turtle, let us turn to another creature with a remarkable form of armor, the armadillo. Across the body of an armadillo are structures called osteoderms, bony plates embedded within the skin that form protective areas of armor. They are not the same as a turtle's shell, but they demonstrate a similar principle. The body can build its own protective structures without needing an external material. These armored plates create a defensive layer against dangers in the environment. And once again, evolution does not search for one identical solution for every species. It explores different forms, combining bone, skin, muscle, and movement. But perhaps the most fascinating story belongs to a small creature living among abandoned shells, the hermit crab. A hermit crab does not create a large mineral shell that grows together with its body. Instead, it uses empty shells left behind by mollusks, especially sea snail shells, as shelter for its soft abdomen. There is something deeply thought-provoking here. A shell was once the home of another creature. After that creature died, the shell became something left behind, but its story was not over. A hermit crab may find it, examine it, crawl inside, and transform it into a place of protection for itself. It is almost a form of natural reuse that existed long before human beings ever thought about the concept of recycling. But what is even more fascinating is that the shell is not always available. The hermit crab grows. Its body changes. The old shell may become too small. And then a new need appears. Find a new home. In environments where many hermit crabs live, suitable shells can become valuable resources. Individuals may compete, struggle over them, or take advantage of opportunities to move into shells that fit them better. In some species, researchers have even observed behaviors involving waiting or the formation of queues or chains of shell exchanges when a desirable shell becomes available. Imagine a group of small crabs standing close together. A new shell appears. The largest crab may move into the shell that fits it better. Its old shell is left behind. A smaller crab may quickly take possession of it, and the shell continues to be used. There is no architect, no landlord, no contract, and yet there is still a tiny economy of homes. And this allows us to reflect on something deeply human. We often think that we own the things that protect us, but sometimes we are only temporarily living within structures that life has given us. A job, a home, a role, a relationship, an identity. These things can be deeply important, but not all of them are meant to last forever. Like the hermit crab, there are times when we have to recognize that the shell that once protected us has become too small. Leaving it can be frightening, but sometimes growing means realizing that a place that once fit us does not necessarily have to be the place where we live forever. And then we come to a completely different example, the cuttlebone of the cuttlefish. The cuttlebone is often called the cuttlefish bone, but it is not an external shell in the way we usually imagine one. It is an internal structure within the cuttlefish's body, containing many small chambers and carbonate material. It plays an important role in regulating the animal's buoyancy. The remarkable thing is that this shell is not used to seal the body away from the outside world. It helps the creature live within that world. A cuttlefish can regulate the amount of gas and fluid within the chambers of its cuttlebone, changing the relative density of its body and thereby supporting its ability to remain buoyant and move through the water. So sometimes, a protective structure does not need to resemble a wall. It can be a regulatory system, a framework, a balancing mechanism, something hidden inside that nevertheless determines how a creature exists in the world outside. And perhaps this is where the story of the shell becomes deeper. We often think that protection means building a wall, but nature shows us many different forms of protection. The turtle has a shell connected to its skeleton. The armadillo has osteoderms. The hermit crab borrows the home of another creature. The cuttlefish carries an internal structure that helps control its buoyancy. 4 creatures, 4 strategies, 4 different ways of answering the same question. How do I survive? And as night falls, perhaps that question can also be gently placed before ourselves. What kind? Is it a role that has become familiar to you? An image that other people expect you to maintain? A habit that once helped you feel safe? Or a belief that you have carried for so long that you have forgotten you are allowed to change? Not every shell needs to be broken. Some shells need to be kept. Some need to be repaired. Some need to be opened. And sometimes, some have simply completed their purpose. Like the old shell of a hermit crab, it once protected you during a certain stage of your life. You can be grateful for it without needing to continue living inside it. Perhaps this is one of the gentlest ways to understand growth. Not as becoming a person without any protection, but as knowing which protective layer you are carrying, how it has helped you, and whether you still need it now. Outside, the ocean continues to move. The waves continue to pass over the rocks. The shells continue to lie upon the sand. Tiny creatures continue to search for shelter, and in the quietness of the night, we can recognize that nature has never offered only one way to live. Some creatures build their homes, some borrow homes, some turn their own bodies into homes, and some carry their shells within themselves. Life never stops creating new ways to protect itself, and the story does not end here. Because if a shell can be a home, a suit of armor, or a balancing system, what happens when it becomes part of an even more sophisticated living machine? In the next part, we will enter the world of the nautilus, an ancient creature with spiral chambers within its shell, where architecture, mathematics, buoyancy, and evolution meet in an almost unimaginable design. Nautilus and the secret of spiral architecture. And now, as the night has gradually grown quieter, let us leave the noisy rocky shores behind and journey deeper into the still blue of the ocean. In a place where sunlight has become nothing more than a faint memory, there is a creature slowly drifting through the water, carrying one of the most beautiful structures nature has ever created, the nautilus. From the outside, its shell may make us think of an ancient ornament, a perfect spiral created simply for beauty. But within that beauty lies an intricate living system, where architecture, physics, mathematics, and evolution exist together within a single structure. The Nautilus shell is not merely a layer of armor. It is more like a multi-story building. But what makes it extraordinary is that this building continues to be constructed as the creature grows. As the Nautilus matures, it does not simply abandon its old shell and build a new one. Instead, it continues developing the shell at the front, creating additional chambers. The older chambers gradually become the sections farther back within the spiral structure. When we look at a cross-section of the shell, we can see a series of chambers connected one after another, like chapters in a book arranged along a curve, with no obvious end. What is remarkable is that these chambers are not simply empty spaces. They play an important role in controlling the Nautilus's buoyancy. In water, whether something floats or sinks depends on the relationship between its weight and buoyant force. The Nautilus possesses a system called the siphuncle, which runs through the chambers of the shell and allows it to regulate the amount of fluid and gas within those chambers over time. By changing the condition of these chambers, the Nautilus can adjust its overall density and help maintain its position within the water column. Imagine that you are diving beneath the sea and want to remain still at a particular depth. If your body is too heavy compared with the amount of water it displaces, you will sink. If you are too light, you will rise. But the Nautilus carries a natural regulating system within its own shell. It does not need a modern air tank. It does not need machinery. It does not need electronic equipment. It only has a shell that has been shaped through millions of years of evolution. And each chamber within it is like one part of a larger system of balance. There is something particularly fascinating about the Nautilus shell. The old chambers continue to exist. As the Nautilus grows and creates a new chamber, the previous chambers do not disappear. They become part of the overall structure. This creates the distinctive spiral shape that we see from the outside. If we look at it through the eyes of a mathematician, it is a beautiful geometric structure. If we look through the eyes of a biologist, it is the result of a growth process. If we look through the eyes of a physicist, it is a system involving buoyancy and the distribution of mass. But if we look through the eyes of Carl Jung, perhaps we can see here a profound image of the process of becoming oneself. Because in some way, human beings also grow like a spiral. We do not completely leave the past behind. Old experiences remain. Old memories remain. Lessons, wounds, joys, failures, all of them become part of the structure we call I. But that does not mean we are trapped in the past. Like the Nautilus, we can build a new part without denying the parts that came before. A new chamber does not erase the previous chamber. A new experience does not erase an old experience. We carry our history with us. Jung once wrote in The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, "The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego." A short sentence, yet one that opens the door to many reflections. The ego often wants to believe that it understands itself, that it can control the entire story of its existence. But the depths of the human psyche are always greater than what the ego can see. The Nautilus does not know the entire architecture it is creating either. It simply lives. It grows. It builds one chamber, then another. And from these very simple actions, a beautiful structure emerges. This is also what makes nature so remarkable. Complexity does not always require someone to design the entire structure from the beginning. Sometimes, complexity can emerge from simple rules repeated over time. The Nautilus grows little by little, but those small steps create a spiral. And that spiral is not merely beautiful. It reflects the way matter becomes organized throughout the process of growth. Here, mathematics is not something imposed upon nature from the outside. Mathematics seems to already exist within the way nature grows. We can see spiral forms in snail shells, in certain plant structures, and in the ways patterns of growth emerge. But it is important not to turn every spiral in nature into a perfect golden ratio. These forms arise through many different biological and geometric mechanisms. Their true beauty lies in the fact that the laws of growth can create structures that human beings experience as harmonious. And perhaps this is also why the Nautilus shell often makes people feel a sense of peace. It is not perfectly symmetrical. It is not completely still. It is the trace of a process that is still unfolding. Each spiral is a part of history. Each chamber is a stage of growth. Each new layer added is evidence that the creature continued to live. If you place a Nautilus shell in front of you, you are not simply looking at an object. You are looking at time made visible. You are seeing the process of growth transformed into form. And this may allow us to look at ourselves with a little more gentleness. We often want to become perfect immediately. We want to heal immediately. We want to understand ourselves immediately. We want to know who we will become from this very day. But nature does not work that way. A beautiful shell does not appear in a single night. A chamber is not built before the creature needs it. It is created little by little. And perhaps human beings are the same. You do not need to know the entire path. You only need to be calm enough to build the next chamber. Today can be one chamber. Tomorrow can be another. A lesson, a meeting, a mistake, a moment of forgiveness. A time when you learn to say no. A time when you dare to step beyond what is familiar. All of these can become new parts of the structure that is you. And the most beautiful thing is this. The old parts do not necessarily have to disappear. They can become the foundation, just as the old chambers of the Nautilus remain within its shell. Our past can also become part of our present strength, not because everything that happened to us was good, but because we have the ability to transform the meaning of what has happened. Tonight, if you feel that you are not yet complete, remember the Nautilus. It does not need to be complete before it continues living. It only needs to keep growing. One chamber at a time, one spiral at a time, one day at a time. And as you close your eyes, imagine a Nautilus quietly drifting through the dark water. It is not in a hurry. It is not trying to prove anything. It simply moves through the ocean, carrying with it the entire architecture of its life, the old chambers behind it, the chamber of the present, and an open space ahead, waiting to be built. Perhaps life is like that too. We cannot go back and rebuild the chambers that already exist, but we can always build another new chamber, and from there, our shape continues to change. So, let the thoughts of today gently settle down. You do not need to solve everything before you sleep. You do not need to understand yourself completely in a single night. Just remember that you are still growing. And just like the Nautilus shell, your story is not finished yet. The biological machines hidden inside shells, and from the spiral chambers of the Nautilus, we continue deeper into the world of shells. But this time, let us try to see them not as motionless homes lying on the sand, but as part of living biological machines. Because behind the quiet exterior of a shell, there may be a body that is observing, sensing, moving, hunting, and protecting itself through mechanisms so intricate that it takes human beings an extraordinary amount of time to understand them. A shell can help a creature swim. It can protect a specialized visual system. It can accompany a hunting mechanism that contains venom. And inside some mollusks, structures so tiny that they are almost impossible to see with the naked eye continue working constantly to process food. Nature does not simply build beautiful shells. Nature turns them into part of an entire living system. Let us begin with the scallop. When we think of a seashell, we often imagine it lying still on the ocean floor. But a scallop can actually use its own two shells to create movement. By rapidly opening and closing the two valves, it can push water and generate thrust, allowing its body to move through the water. That movement may not look like the graceful swimming of a fish, nor like the rapid propulsion of a squid, but it is a strategy entirely its own. A creature that seems as though it was designed to remain still can actually use its own shell to leave the place where it is. There is something beautiful about that idea. What we believe exists only for protection can also become a means of movement. Just as in life, sometimes something that once made us feel limited can become the foundation for a new ability. The shell is not merely a wall, it can become a pair of wings. And the scallop makes the story even more fascinating when we look at its eyes. Some species of scallop have many small eyes along the edge of their mantle, sometimes numbering dozens or more. These eyes are not exactly like human eyes. They have specialized structures. And in scallops, a system involving concave mirrors can help form images on the retina rather than relying solely on a lens in the way we are familiar with. Try to imagine it. A creature resting on the ocean floor, surrounded by water, with light changing according to depth, where the smallest movement of a predator could determine whether it survives. And along the edge of its body are numerous little windows, sensing the world around it. Not one pair of eyes, but an entire circle of observation. There is something deeply meaningful in that image. We often think that seeing the world means seeing it through our own eyes. But nature shows us that there are countless ways of perceiving. Some creatures see with large eyes. Some sense light through simple structures. Some use chemicals. Some sense vibrations. Some detect pressure or movement in the water. There is no single way to perceive reality. And through the lens of Carl Jung, this reminds us that the outer world is never experienced in exactly the same way by everyone. Each person sees life through their own memories, experiences, emotions, and deeper layers of the mind. We do not see only with our eyes. We also see through the history of who we are. But the ocean contains even more remarkable biological machines. Let us meet the cone snail. From the outside, it may possess a beautiful shell, with patterns that make people want to pick it up and admire it. But behind that beauty lies one of the most remarkable hunting systems in the animal world. Some cone snails use a structure resembling a harpoon, a tiny biological spear, to deliver venom into their prey. This structure is associated with the radula, an organ resembling a tooth-bearing ribbon found in many mollusks. In cone snails, a single tooth can be used like a projectile, carrying a mixture of toxins that helps immobilize prey. What is astonishing is that all of this takes place inside such a small body. No enormous claws, no massive teeth, no powerful muscles like those of a large land predator. Instead, evolution has produced an extremely specialized solution. One tooth, one harpoon, one mixture of toxins, one precise movement, and that is enough. This is a beautiful reminder of how nature works. Strength does not necessarily lie in size. Sometimes strength lies in precision, and if we continue going deeper, we encounter the radula, a tongue-like structure bearing tiny teeth found in many mollusks. Depending on the species, the number and shape of these teeth vary greatly. Some species may have hundreds or even thousands of tiny tooth-like structures arranged in rows. They are used to scrape, cut, grind, or process food. Imagine an incredibly tiny brush, but every bristle on it is a functional structure. Every movement contributes to processing food. Every tiny tooth is part of a larger system. No single part exists entirely on its own. This is what makes the bodies of living creatures so remarkable. A shell, a muscle, an eye, a tooth, a venom gland, a nervous system, all of them connected, not as separate pieces, but as a living network. And this brings us back once again to an idea closely connected to the psychological depth of Jung. Human beings also often try to divide themselves into separate parts. This is work. This is family. This is the past. This is fear. This is a dream. But beneath all these divisions, we are still one integrated system. A memory can influence a choice. A fear can influence a relationship. An old belief can quietly guide a present action. Just as within the body of a living creature, no part truly exists in complete isolation. Jung once wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps when we look at the biological machines of the ocean, we can also think about ourselves. A part of us may be operating without our understanding it. A reaction may appear before we have time to think. An emotion may rise from somewhere very deep. A choice may be driven by a need we have not yet learned to name. And just as biologists patiently observe a scallop or a cone snail in order to understand the mechanisms within, human beings also need to learn how to observe themselves, without judgment, without rushing, simply observing. Because when we look long enough, we begin to realize that the things that seem chaotic within us sometimes have structure. They have reasons, they have histories, they have functions, and they can be understood. Tonight, before you drift into sleep, imagine a scallop opening and closing its shell beneath the dark water. Imagine dozens of tiny eyes along the edge of its body, sensing the movements around it. Imagine a small cone snail slowly moving across the ocean floor, carrying an intricate hunting mechanism that we can barely perceive from the outside. And remember that all of these things were shaped through an evolutionary history so long that it stretches far beyond the limits of human imagination. A shell may appear quiet, but inside it, there may be an entire world in motion. Movement, sensation, defense, hunting, adaptation, life. And perhaps human beings are the same. Sometimes, the calmest exterior can conceal the deepest inner world. A quiet person does not mean there is nothing inside them. A calm person does not mean they have never struggled. A gentle smile may conceal an entire history. Like a shell, we often show the world only our surface. But inside, a complex system continues to operate. And perhaps what matters most is not trying to become completely transparent to the world. It is learning to be honest with ourselves about what is happening inside. Because when we understand our inner world, we no longer need to be so afraid of it. And as the night grows deeper, the ocean becomes quieter as well. The shells remain there, but their beauty is no longer found only in their colors or shapes. We begin to see what lies behind them. A living machine shaped through millions of years of evolutionary experimentation. And the next story will take us from the intricacy of biology towards something that feels almost more magical. Because some shells are not beautiful only because of their shapes. They can also shine like pearls, reflect light like metal, and produce colors that their very material structure has quietly created. That will be our journey into the world of chemistry, light, pearls, and shimmering nacre, where beauty is not simply something we see, but something created through the deeper laws of matter, the beauty of shells created by chemistry and light. And as we have journeyed through shells as armor, homes, and even intricate biological machines, let us slow down for a moment and look at something entirely different. Beauty. There are shells that make people stop and stare, not because they are large, not because they are powerful, but simply because they are extraordinarily beautiful. Some are polished and smooth, as though they had been carefully handcrafted. Others shimmer like metal beneath the sunlight. Some shells reflect shades of blue, purple, gold, and green, as we change the angle from which we look at them. And then there are pearls, formed through a process that, when examined closely, reveals something profound. Sometimes beauty begins with a very small disturbance. The strange thing is that nature does not need a jeweler standing outside to create these colors. It uses chemistry, material structure, and light. And perhaps this is one of the gentlest lessons nature can offer us. Sometimes what makes something beautiful is not absolute perfection, but the way it transforms unexpected circumstances into part of itself. Let us begin with pearls. In the human imagination, pearls are often associated with purity, elegance, and perfection. But their story begins inside an oyster or another mollusk capable of producing pearls, where an irritant or foreign material enters the animal's tissues. The organism responds by depositing layers of mineral organic material, primarily nacre, around the irritated area. Layer by layer, very slowly, without haste. There is no single moment when the pearl suddenly appears in its finished form. It is formed over time, and that makes the pearl a beautiful image for reflecting on the human psyche. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This sentence is often mentioned when discussing the process of becoming oneself, and when we place it beside the story of a pearl, we can see a striking parallel. Something that was initially unwanted can eventually become part of a new structure. That does not mean that every painful experience automatically creates beauty. Life is not that simple. But human beings possess a remarkable ability. We can transform experience into meaning. A wound can become understanding. A failure can become growth. A loss can teach us to appreciate what we still have, not because those experiences were inherently beautiful, but because we can choose how we live with them. A pearl does not choose in the human sense. Yet the layers of nacre produced through that biological response can transform something unusual into a remarkably beautiful structure. From there, we can turn to cowrie shells, famous for their smooth, glossy surfaces and distinctive shapes. Cowries do not possess the same kind of beauty as a pearl. They are not shining spheres. Their beauty lies in their surface. Smooth, glossy, almost as if they had been polished by hand. That surface is the result of the structure of the shell and the way the animal's mantle participates in the formation and maintenance of the shell. In many cowrie species, the mantle can extend over the developing shell, contributing to the distinctive smooth surface. When we look at a cowrie shell, it is easy to imagine that someone carefully crafted it. But no, it is the product of a tiny living creature. And this reminds us that nature does not separate function and beauty in quite the same way humans often do. A glossy surface may help protect the shell. A particular shape may be related to the way the animal lives. A layer of material can serve a mechanical function while also creating an attractive appearance. Beauty is sometimes a byproduct of adaptation, but if cowries draw our attention to the surface, abalone takes us into an entirely different world. Inside an abalone shell is a material called nacre. If you have ever seen the shimmering inner surface of a shell, you have probably seen nacre. It can reflect shades of blue, purple, pink, silver, and green depending on the angle from which it is viewed. But why? Because nacre is not simply a uniform mass of material. It is made from extremely small structures in which mineral crystals, primarily aragonite, are arranged in layers interspersed with organic material. This layered architecture influences the way light travels through, reflects from, and interacts with the structure. And this is where chemistry meets light. Our eyes perceive color, but color does not exist entirely within the object itself. It emerges from the encounter between matter and light. A very small change in structure can cause light to interact in a different way, and from that, colors can appear to shift as we change our viewing angle. This phenomenon is known as structural color. Not all colors come from pigments. Some colors arise primarily from the way microscopic structures interact with light. We can see this in many places throughout nature, from butterfly wings to bird feathers and even in the shells of certain mollusks. Imagine holding a shell in your hand. You tilt it to the left, blue appears. You tilt it to the right, purple emerges. You bring it closer to the light. A shimmering silver band appears. The shell is not necessarily changing color in the way we usually imagine. Your perspective changes, and the light tells you a different story. There is something deeply meaningful about this when viewed through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology. We often believe that we are seeing the truth of a person or a situation. But sometimes, what changes is not the object itself, it is our perspective. Someone who once made us angry may become easier to understand when we learn their story. A failure that once seemed like an ending may become a turning point when we look back years later. A painful memory may take on a different meaning as we mature. Like nacre, an experience does not necessarily have to change completely, but the way the light of consciousness falls upon it can change. And when that happens, the color of the memory can change as well. Perhaps this is why Jung was so deeply interested in confronting the hidden parts of ourselves. Not to turn the past into something perfect, but to see it from a deeper perspective. A shimmering shell does not need to have only one color. And perhaps human beings do not need to have only one story about themselves either. You may have once been vulnerable and still become strong. You may have made mistakes and still grow. You may have lost your way and still discover another path. The old layers do not necessarily need to be erased. They can become part of a new kind of beauty. And when we look at the nacre of an abalone, we can see this in a physical sense. Tiny layers arranged in an orderly structure can create an effect far greater than any individual layer could produce on its own. One extremely thin layer, then another, and another. Eventually, the entire structure can produce the iridescent effect that our eyes perceive as extraordinary beauty. Life can be like that too. A single day may not seem particularly meaningful. A conversation, a moment of silence, a small decision, an ordinary morning, but thousands of such days accumulate, and together they create the person you are becoming. No layer is meaningless simply because it is small. And now, as the night grows deeper, imagine an abalone resting quietly on the ocean floor. The water moves gently above it. Light passes through the surface. The nacre reflects soft, shifting colors. No one is there to admire it. No camera. No spotlight. The shell remains beautiful even when no one is watching. Perhaps that is another profound lesson for us. Not every kind of beauty needs a witness. You do not need other people's approval for what you have overcome to have meaning. You do not need everyone to understand you. Some of the most beautiful things within us exist very quietly, like a layer of nacre hidden inside a shell, like a lesson you have never told anyone, like a wound that has become wisdom, like a part of your soul known only to you. And perhaps this is when we begin to understand that the beauty of shells is not simply found in their colors. It lies in the story that created those colors. Chemistry creates the material. Structure directs the light. Light creates color in our eyes. And time completes the story. A shell, then, is almost like a poem written by matter itself. It has no words, no voice, and yet it can still make us stop and think. Tonight, if your mind is still holding thoughts that have not been resolved, let them remain there for a while. You do not need to force them away. Imagine them as layers of nacre, layer by layer, little by little. There is no need to become perfect immediately, because sometimes what we need is not to erase what happened, but to give time and understanding a chance to rearrange the way we see it. And as you slowly drift towards sleep, remember that even in the darkest places of the ocean, life continues to create structures capable of reflecting light. Perhaps there is a layer of light like that within each of us. It may not always shine brightly. Sometimes it is only a very thin silver glow, but it is still there. And from the extraordinary colors created by chemistry and light, we will move toward another mystery of nature. Why are almost no two shells exactly alike? Because behind every ridge, every spine, every patch of color, and every spiral may lie a unique combination of genes, growth rate, and environmental conditions. And perhaps, just like human beings, every shell carries its own unique fingerprint of a life once lived. No two shells are exactly alike, and from the shimmering layers of nacre we have just explored, let us continue walking slowly along the beach in our imagination. The waves still move steadily toward the shore and then retreat. Tiny grains of sand quietly shift beneath the moonlight, and somewhere among the countless shells scattered across the beach, there is something very easy to overlook. Almost no two shells are exactly alike. They may belong to the same species, have the same basic shape, share the same structure, and even come from the same stretch of ocean. Yet when we look closely, we can still find tiny differences. One ridge may be slightly higher. One spine may curve a little farther to one side. One patch of color may be darker. One spiral may have grown slightly faster during a particular stage of life. And those tiny differences tell us a story about genes, growth, and the environment. From a distance, a beach may look like a collection of similar objects, but if you bend down, pick up each shell, and observe it carefully, you begin to realize that every one of them carries its own history. Just like human beings, we may all belong to the same species, live beneath the same sky, and experience the same fundamental needs: to be loved, protected, recognized, and accepted. But no two people have exactly the same story. No one grows up with precisely the same memories. No one sees the world through exactly the same psychological eyes. Carl Jung once wrote in 2 essays on analytical psychology, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Perhaps a shell is much the same. There is no single formula for creating beauty. Genes provide the initial possibilities. They are like a foundational blueprint, influencing many characteristics of shape, structure, and development. But the blueprint is not the entire story. Throughout the process of growth, the organism is also influenced by the environment around it: temperature, food availability, salinity, water currents, light, predators, competition. All of these can leave traces. A shell grows together with the organism inside it, and because of that, it is not simply a protective layer that is created once and then finished. It is a structure that is continuously being built. In many mollusks, the edge of the shell is an important region of growth. The animal deposits new material along this area, allowing the shell to gradually expand. When conditions change, the rate or pattern of growth can change as well. A favorable period may leave one kind of growth pattern. A difficult period may leave another. And so, day after day, the story is written onto the shell, not with ink, not with words, but with minerals. Imagine the shell as a diary that the creature never realizes it is writing. Each new layer is a page. Each ridge is a milestone. Each change in coloration may reflect a complex interaction between the organism and its environment. And when we hold that shell decades or centuries later, we may be holding a small piece of the history that organism once lived through. Even more fascinating are the patterns. Why do some shells have evenly spaced stripes? Why do others have spots? Why do some species develop patterns resembling zigzags, while others display soft bands running along their spirals? Part of the answer lies in the way cells and tissues near the growing edge of the shell regulate the deposition of pigments and mineral material. Repeated biological processes can generate remarkably complex patterns. In other words, a large pattern can emerge from countless tiny decisions repeated over time. There is something beautiful about that, because we often look at the final result and call it beauty. But nature does not begin with beauty. It begins with life. The organism needs to survive. It needs to avoid predators. It needs to withstand waves. It needs to conserve energy. It needs to move or attach itself to a surface. It needs to reproduce. And across countless generations, characteristics that help an organism survive can be maintained and transformed. Eventually, we look at the shell and say, "How beautiful." But from the perspective of evolution, the original story may have been much simpler. It works. A spine may reduce the risk of being eaten. A ridge may increase the strength of the shell. A flattened shape may suit life on rocks. A thick shell may help withstand physical forces. A particular color may contribute to camouflage. A complex structure may help an organism adapt to a specific environment. And then, in the eyes of human beings, all of those functions become art. That is one of nature's most beautiful paradoxes. Life does not necessarily try to create beauty, yet in its attempt to survive, It often creates things that we call beautiful. Look at a shell covered with small spines. We may see aggression, but to the organism inside, they may simply be a form of protection. Look at a shell with an almost perfect spiral. We see mathematics, but for the organism, it is simply the way its body grows. Look at shifting colors across a layer of nacre. We see art, but to nature, it is the result of material structure interacting with light. Perhaps beauty always has several layers. One layer for the eyes, one layer for science, and a deeper layer for contemplation. This is where Jung's ideas become especially interesting. Jung devoted much attention to symbols and images emerging from the depths of the mind. He believed that human beings do not live only through what can be explained by reason. We are also influenced by images, memories, symbols, and deeper unconscious layers. When one person looks at a spiral shell, they may see only geometry. Another may see the ocean. Someone else may remember childhood. Another may feel a sense of peace. Someone else may think about time. The shell has not changed, but the meaning a person sees within it can be completely different. And perhaps this also explains why the differences between human beings deserve to be valued. No two shells are exactly alike, and no two lives are exactly alike. You may look at someone else and think they are moving too slowly, but you do not know how their environment has shaped them. You may look at someone who seems strong and assume they have never been hurt, but you do not know what layers they had to build in order to protect themselves. You may look at someone who is withdrawn and think they are cold, but perhaps that is simply the shell they built after years of learning how to protect themselves. And here, we can gently ask a question. If a shell is shaped by genes, time, and environment, how different are human beings? We are born with certain tendencies. Then life begins writing upon us. Family, childhood, love, loss, success, failure. The people we meet, the things we believe, the things we once feared, all of them leave tiny ridges. Over the years, those ridges become part of the shape of a person. But that does not mean we are completely determined by our past. A shell continues to grow, and so do we. We still have the ability to change the way we understand what has happened to us. Perhaps we cannot erase an old chapter, but we can continue writing. That may be one of the gentlest things nature can remind us of before we fall asleep. You do not need to be like anyone else. A shell does not need to resemble the shell beside it to prove its worth. It only needs to complete its own story. And perhaps the same is true for you. If today you feel that you are moving more slowly than everyone else, remember that growth does not happen at the same speed for everyone. If you feel that you carry scars, remember that they can also be part of your history. If you feel different, do not be too quick to assume that different means wrong. In nature, difference is part of life. A beach is not beautiful because every shell looks the same. It is beautiful because of its diversity. Large shells lie beside small ones. Smooth shells lie beside spiny ones. Bright shells lie beside darker ones. Each carries its own traces, and when the night waves gently pull them closer together, no shell needs to abandon its shape in order to become part of the beach. Perhaps human beings should learn the same lesson. We can belong to the same world while preserving our individual shape. We can love others without becoming their copies. We can live together without erasing our differences. And when you close your eyes tonight, try to imagine a small shell resting beneath the moonlight. It is not perfect. It is not perfectly symmetrical. It does not look like any other shell. But those very differences are what make its story unique. Its beauty does not come from resembling an ideal shell. Its beauty comes from being one of a kind. And perhaps that is a gentle way to look at yourself as well. You do not need to become perfect. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to keep growing. One layer at a time, one day at a time, one experience at a time. Because sometimes, what we call beauty is not something created despite the difficulties of life. It is the trace of how a living thing learned to exist within this world. And from these shells, each carrying its own unique fingerprint, we will move into an even larger world. A world where size is no longer measured by the delicate beauty of a shell, but by the astonishing power of enormous living creatures. There, we will meet the giant clam massive bivalves that can weigh hundreds of kilograms, live in partnership with symbiotic algae, and use sunlight to sustain a remarkable relationship between animal, plant, and ocean. A creature that may appear to be nothing more than a motionless rock, yet inside, it is alive, metabolizing, interacting with light, and telling us another extraordinary story about the wonder of life. The giants of the shell world. And now, after quietly observing tiny shells, delicate ridges, unique patterns, and layers of nacre reflecting the light, let your imagination carry you somewhere much larger. The seawater becomes clearer. Sunlight filters down through layers of emerald blue water, and on the ocean floor, among coral reefs, a shape appears so extraordinary that it is almost difficult to believe it is alive. It is so large that, at first glance, you might mistake it for a rock, but it is not a rock. It is the giant clam, one of the most remarkable bivalves in the ocean. If a small shell can amaze us with its delicacy, the giant clam astonishes us with its sheer scale. Some individuals can grow to enormous sizes and weigh hundreds of kilograms. Their thick, massive shells, marked with powerful ridges, rest on the seafloor like ancient structures that the ocean placed there long ago. But the most fascinating thing is not their size. It is the secret hidden inside. Because the giant clam is not simply a massive animal that survives by filtering food from the water, it also maintains a remarkable relationship with microscopic photosynthetic algae living within its tissues. These tiny organisms can use sunlight to produce organic compounds through photosynthesis. In return, the giant clam provides them with a protected environment and many of the conditions they need to survive. Pause for a moment and picture this: a gigantic creature and microscopic organisms. Two worlds that seem completely different, living together. The giant clam provides shelter. The algae use sunlight. The algae produce products of photosynthesis, and this relationship contributes to the energy available to the host. This is symbiosis, one of the most beautiful ideas in biology, because it reminds us that in nature, survival does not always mean competition. Sometimes, thriving means learning how to live together. And if we look at this through the lens of Carl Jung, the image becomes a profound metaphor for the human mind. Jung devoted considerable attention to the relationships between different parts of the psyche, between consciousness and the unconscious, between the ego we recognize and the deeper layers we have not fully understood. Human beings often want to think of themselves as independent individuals. We say, "This is me." But if we look more closely, that self is shaped by countless relationships: family, friends, people who once loved us, people who once hurt us, memories, values, stories we heard when we were children. We imagine ourselves as separate individuals, yet within us exist countless invisible connections. Just as the giant clam cannot be fully understood when separated from the organisms living in symbiosis with it, we may never fully understand ourselves if we look only at conscious awareness and refuse to listen to the deeper layers within. And perhaps this becomes even more fascinating when we look at the colors of the giant clam. If you have ever seen a giant clam beneath sunlight, you may have noticed shades of blue, green, brown, or other vivid colors within the soft tissues around the edge of its shell. These colors are not simply the color of the shell. The soft tissues can contain abundant, symbiotic algae and microscopic structures that interact with light. As a result, the colors we see are related to the way light enters, reflects, scatters, and is absorbed within those tissues. And this creates a beautiful paradox. A creature that appears to sit motionless in the darkness of the seafloor depends, in part, on light. It cannot rise into the sky to search for the sun. It cannot grow leaves like a tree. but by living in partnership with organisms capable of photosynthesis. It brings sunlight into the story of its own existence. Sunlight falls upon the ocean. It passes through the surface. It enters living tissues. It interacts with microscopic structures. And ultimately, it contributes to sustaining the life of a giant organism. There is something almost poetic about this process. Light from a star, roughly 150 million kilometers away, can pass through the atmosphere, travel across the surface of the ocean, and become part of life existing beneath the sea. The distance seems unimaginably vast. And yet, life connects it all. Perhaps that is one reason the natural world can make us feel peaceful when we observe it before sleep. It reminds us that we do not exist in an empty space. Every breath is connected to a much larger world. Every meal is connected to countless living organisms. Every ray of sunlight touching our skin began its journey from a star. Every drop of water within our bodies has traveled through a long history of the Earth. We are part of a network far larger than the everyday ego usually allows us to see. Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Placed beside the image of the giant clam, the quote invites a gentle thought. Becoming who we truly are does not necessarily mean separating ourselves from the world. A living creature can remain fully itself while existing in relationship with countless other things. The giant clam remains a giant clam, but it does not exist alone. The algae do not transform it into something else. Their relationship becomes part of the way it exists. Human beings are much the same. We can grow without denying the people who helped shape us. We can become independent while still accepting help. We can establish boundaries while continuing to love. We can become ourselves without cutting every connection. That is a very different kind of maturity. Not isolation, but conscious connection. And when we look at the giant clam from a biological perspective, we discover another remarkable truth. Being large does not mean life becomes simpler. Quite the opposite. A large body requires a complex operating system. The shell must grow. The body must maintain balance. The tissues must receive light. Nutrients must be exchanged. The symbiotic relationship must be maintained. Every part depends upon another. This reveals a profound principle of nature. The more closely we look, the more we realize that life is not simply a collection of separate objects. It is a system of relationships. A shell is not merely a shell. It is connected to the body. The body is connected to the environment. The environment is connected to light. The light is connected to the sun, and all of it exists within a larger system. This also invites us to reconsider the very idea of the self. Sometimes we become so focused on ourselves that we forget we are supported by an invisible network. A word of encouragement that once carried us through a difficult day. Someone who believed in us when we no longer believed in ourselves. A book that appeared at exactly the right moment. A chance encounter, a memory, a place. All of these can become small sources of light within our inner lives. And sometimes, just as the giant clam does not generate all of its available energy entirely on its own but participates in a symbiotic relationship, we do not need to carry everything by ourselves. Accepting help is not weakness. Needing other people is not failure. Living in connection does not mean losing our freedom. It may be one of the most natural parts of being human. Tonight, imagine yourself descending into a quiet region of the sea. The sunlight gradually fades as you move deeper. Small schools of fish drift past. Corals rest silently. And on the ocean floor, a giant clam opens its soft tissues beneath the light. There is no hurry, no noise, nothing to prove. It simply lives. It receives light. It exchanges resources with its symbiotic partners. It filters water. It grows. And it exists within the rhythm of the ocean. Perhaps human beings need moments like this too. Moments when we do not have to prove anything. Moments when we do not have to compete. Moments when we do not have to become someone else. Moments when we are simply allowed to exist. If today you are exhausted from having to be strong, Remember the giant clam. Even a gigantic creature depends upon symbiosis. Even a massive body needs tiny organisms. Even a powerful system depends upon cooperation. And a mature human being may also need healthy relationships. You do not have to do everything alone. You do not always need to know the answer. You do not always have to stand perfectly upright. Sometimes maturity simply means knowing where you need light and knowing how to receive it. And when you lie down tonight, let this image remain in your mind. A massive shell resting quietly beneath blue water. Sunlight filtering through the ocean. Tiny organisms living within its tissues. A creature that looks almost like a rock, yet is exchanging, adapting, and growing. It reminds us that life can exist in ways that appearances cannot fully reveal. A rock may simply be a rock, but a giant clam that looks like a rock contains an entire world within it. And perhaps human beings are like that too. Do not judge a life too quickly by its appearance. Do not assume that a quiet person has no story. Do not assume that a strong person does not need love. Do not assume that someone standing still is not changing, because behind a peaceful exterior may exist an entire inner ecosystem, constantly moving and transforming. And as the waves continue to touch the shore tonight, let them carry away some of the tension that remains inside you. You have lived enough for one day. Now, you can rest. Let your body relax. Let your breathing slow down. And if a thought appears, you do not need to hold on to it. Let it drift away like a ray of light passing through the surface of the sea. Because beneath the ocean, the giant clam does not need to hurry. It simply continues living in relationship with the world around it. Perhaps tonight we can do the same. Slow down, breathe gently, and remember that you, too, are part of a world far greater than the worries of today. From the giants of the shell world, our next journey will bring us back to humanity, because for thousands of years, shells have not been merely shelters for marine creatures. Human beings have picked them up, held them in their hands, and transformed them into tools, ornaments, and objects of everyday life. And in that moment, the shell began to leave the ocean, to become part of the story of our own species, when seashells became human tools. And from beneath the blue waters, where shells once served as homes, armor, and even parts of the bodies of small creatures, let us gently return to the human world. Imagine a coastline thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of years ago. There were no stores filled with tools, no steel, no plastic, and none of the manufactured materials we use every day. Human beings stood before the ocean with almost nothing in their hands. Then someone bent down and picked up a shell, something that seemed to have been discarded, something the waves had carried onto the shore. And through observation, curiosity, and creativity, humans began to realize that this shell could become a tool. It was a very small transition, but it reveals something enormous about the human mind. We do not simply see the world as it exists. We see possibilities for what it could become. A shell may once have been the home of an animal, but after that creature died and left the shell behind, its story did not necessarily end. In human hands, that material could be transformed into something entirely new. A sharp edge could become a cutting tool. A curved fragment could become a container. A small shell could become jewelry. A distinctive shape could become part of a tool. And in some cultures, shells were even transformed into instruments capable of producing sound. Perhaps this is one of the most remarkable abilities of human beings. The ability to see a hidden use inside something that appears ordinary. Let us begin with cutting tools. Some shells have relatively sharp edges or structures hard enough to be used for simple tasks, such as scraping, cutting, or working with softer materials. Larger shell fragments could also be modified or used in ways suited to particular purposes. Today, we might look at this and think it seems simple, but try to place yourself in that distant world. There were no steel knives, no factories, no stores selling tools. Every material around you had value. A stone, a branch, A bone, a shell. Human beings had to observe. They had to experiment. They had to fail, and then try again. Across generations, those experiences became knowledge. Perhaps this was one of the deepest beginnings of technology. Technology did not begin with enormous machines. It may have begun with a person looking down at the ground and asking, "What can I do with this?" From one small question, an entirely new world could emerge. And shells had another fascinating possibility. They could become hooks or components of tools associated with fishing and gathering food. People who lived near the sea for thousands of years learned to make use of the materials the ocean provided. Shells, bones, wood, plant fibers, and stone could be combined to create tools that helped them survive. This reveals an important principle of ancient human culture. Creativity often begins with adaptation to the environment. People living near forests learned about wood. People living near rivers learned about currents. People living along coastlines learned about tides, fish, shells, and the materials the sea carried onto the shore. The environment did not simply provide food, it also taught human beings how to think. And here, we can see a beautiful parallel with the ideas of Carl Jung. Human beings do not develop in a vacuum. We are shaped by our environment, our families, our cultures, our memories, and the experiences we move through. But there is something important. The environment provides the raw material. We decide what we create from it. A shell can lie on a beach for hundreds of days without becoming anything else. But when a human hand touches it, it can become an object with meaning. The same can be true of our experiences. An event does not completely determine who we will become. How we understand it, how we respond to it, how we integrate it into our personal story. These are the things that can transform the meaning of an experience. A statement often attributed to Jung says, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." However, the exact origin of this quotation is not clearly established in Jung's writings, so it is better not to treat it as a verified direct quotation from him. But the idea behind it remains powerful. We are not merely the sum of everything that has happened to us, and the shell is a beautiful image through which to understand that idea. One material can have many lives. First, it is part of a living creature. Then it becomes natural material. Then it becomes a tool. And eventually, it can become a symbol. But perhaps what has made shells most valuable to human beings is not their practical usefulness. It is their beauty. For thousands of years, people have used shells as ornaments. Small shells could be strung into necklaces. Shell fragments could be drilled, polished, or combined with other materials. Color, shape, texture, shine. All of these qualities could give shells aesthetic value. But jewelry is not simply something beautiful. It can say, "I belong here. I am part of this community. I have traveled to that place. I hold this position. I carry this memory." And this is where the shell moves from the world of matter into the world of symbolism. A shell is no longer merely calcium carbonate. It can become memory, identity, status, belief, love, or a promise. This is one of the extraordinary qualities of being human. We can assign meaning to physical objects. A ring is not merely metal. A photograph is not merely paper. A letter is not merely ink. A shell is not merely material from the sea. Its value can sometimes exist in the story we place inside it. And through the lens of Jung, this becomes even more fascinating. Human beings live in a world of symbols. Objects in the external world can awaken images and emotions deep within us. A shell can evoke the ocean. The ocean can evoke depth. Depth can evoke the unconscious. And the unconscious, in Jungian psychology, is one of the most important realms through which human beings can explore themselves. Perhaps that is why shells have appeared across so many cultures with such different meanings. They can be associated with the sea, fertility, protection, life, wealth, journey, or mysterious forces of nature. But before it becomes a symbol, a shell is simply an object, lying on a beach, a human being sees it and gives it a story. One of the most fascinating uses of shells is their transformation into musical instruments. A large marine shell can sometimes be modified with an opening and blown like a natural horn. The resulting sound can be deep, resonant, and distinctive. Imagine a person standing beside the sea thousands of years ago. In their hands is not a horn manufactured in a factory. It is a shell that once belonged to the ocean. They raise it to their lips. They breathe into it, and a sound emerges. Depending on the culture, that sound might have been used in rituals, communication, ceremonies, or other forms of cultural expression. There is something deeply beautiful about this. A shell that once served as the home of a living creature becomes an instrument through which humans create sound, from life to material, from material to music. A single object passes through multiple layers of meaning, and perhaps human life is similar. We often think that when one chapter ends, everything belonging to that chapter ends with it. But sometimes, something old can become the raw material for something new. An old memory can become a lesson. A failure can become experience. Pain can teach us to understand another person more deeply. A period of being lost can eventually lead us toward a path that fits us better. Not because the past automatically becomes something good, but because human beings possess the ability to transform meaning. That may be one of the deepest abilities of the human mind. And as night falls, perhaps you can try looking at one thing from today in the same way. Was there something that upset you? Something that did not happen the way you wanted? A conversation that stayed in your mind? You do not have to solve it tonight. Simply place it in front of yourself like a shell lying on the beach. Observe it, without judgment, without rushing, and ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? You may not find the answer immediately, and that is okay. A shell does not become a tool in a single moment. It requires an observing hand, an idea, an experiment, and sometimes generations of accumulated experience. Human beings are like that too. We are becoming ourselves little by little. And when we look back through history, we can see that ancient people did not necessarily live in a world poor in materials. They lived in a world where almost everything could become a source of inspiration. The sea provided food, but the sea also provided materials. Shells provided calcium carbonate, but they also provided shape, color, hardness, sound, symbols, and eventually, stories. A shell can travel from the bottom of the sea to the shore, from the shore into a human hand, from a hand into a tool, from a tool into jewelry, and from jewelry into culture. No stage is truly lost. Each stage simply becomes another chapter. And as you prepare to drift deeper into sleep, hold on to this simple image. An ancient hand reaching down and picking up a shell beside the sea. That person knew nothing about chemistry, nothing about evolution, nothing about materials science. But they understood something profoundly important. This could be useful. That was the beginning of creativity. And perhaps there are things in our own lives that are lying quietly within reach, waiting for us to discover how they might be used. An unexplored ability, a lesson we have not yet understood. A memory we have never truly revisited. A part of our personality that we once considered a weakness. Sometimes, what we need is not to search for something completely new. Sometimes, we simply need to learn how to look again at what we already have. With different eyes. The waves are still moving. The shell is still lying on the beach. Moonlight reflects across its surface. And its story is not over, because from tools, we are about to take another step toward value, money, power, and symbolism. There were shells once used as currency. There were shells transformed into precious ornaments. There were shells exchanged between communities separated by thousands of kilometers. And from one small object of the ocean, we will enter a much larger story about how human beings assign value to matter, and how that value can sometimes reshape an entire society. when seashells became money, jewelry, and symbols of power. And from the moment a seashell was picked up by human hands and transformed into a tool, its story opened another door, a stranger door. Because the shell was no longer valued only for what it could do, but for the meaning human beings gave to it. Imagine a distant evening, thousands of years ago, when small fires were burning beside a coastal community. Someone places a few small, white shells in front of them, smooth, shiny, distinctive in shape. These objects cannot be eaten, they cannot be planted, they cannot be used to build a house, and yet someone else is willing to exchange food, tools, or other valuable objects for them. A simple but profound question begins to emerge. Why could a seashell become money? The answer does not exist entirely within the shell itself. It exists within human belief. Throughout history, certain types of shells, especially cowrie shells, were used as mediums of exchange in many parts of the world. They had several physical characteristics that made them relatively convenient for this purpose. They were small, durable, recognizable, easy to count, easy to transport, and relatively easy to store. But these physical qualities alone were not enough to turn a shell into money. An object becomes a medium of exchange only when a community shares the belief that other people will accept it in return for something else. And this is where the story of the seashell becomes deeply connected to the psychology of Carl Jung. Because human beings do not live only in a world of things they can touch. We also live in a world constructed through meaning, symbols, and shared beliefs. A natural shell does not know that it has value. The ocean does not place a price on it. There is no physical law declaring that one cowrie shell must be worth a certain amount of food. Human beings create that system. And once enough people believe in it, an ordinary physical object can acquire enormous social power. This reveals something fascinating about money. Money is not simply a material object. It is, in many forms, a collective agreement made tangible. Today, we can look at a banknote and see numbers, images, and symbols. But the paper itself does not possess the practical value represented by those numbers. Its value exists because society collectively agrees to recognize it. In a certain sense, the cowrie shell tells a similar story. An object comes from the sea. A community gives it meaning, and that meaning allows it to enter the economic life of human beings. But the shell was not only exchanged, it was also worn on the body. And when an object is placed on the human body, it often begins to speak another language. The language of identity, of status, of belonging, of memory. Imagine someone wearing a necklace made of shells around their neck. To an outsider, it may simply look like beautiful jewelry, but within that person's community, it might communicate something much deeper. It might say, "This is who I am. This is where I come from. This is where I belong. And sometimes, this is my place within this community." This reveals something profound about human psychology. We are constantly using external objects to express something about ourselves. Clothing, rings, badges, tattoos, family symbols, jewelry. All of these can become signs through which we tell a story about who we are. From a Jungian perspective, human beings often use symbols to express things that are difficult to communicate directly through language. A seashell may be tiny, but the meaning placed inside it can be enormous. This is also why ancient shell jewelry is so significant to archaeologists. It does not simply tell us that ancient people appreciated beauty. It can also reveal that humans were using objects to create identity, exchange goods, decorate their bodies, and construct social meaning, long before the emergence of complex urban civilizations. Some shell ornaments, known from archaeology, are tens of thousands of years old. Discoveries such as perforated nacarious shells, used as personal ornaments at Paleolithic sites, suggest something worth pausing over. The desire for beauty and self-expression is not a product of modern society. It is ancient, perhaps older than cities, older than writing, and possibly older than many of the forms of social organization we recognize today. Imagine an ancient person finding a beautiful shell. They notice its color, its shape, its unusual appearance. Something about it feels special. They make a small hole, thread a cord through it, and wear it on their body. The moment may seem simple, but psychologically, it is profound, because that person has taken an object from nature and transformed it into a part of themselves. From the external world, the shell enters the inner world, and from there, it becomes part of a personal story. Perhaps this is also why human beings so often keep small objects connected to memories. An old bracelet, a stone, a gift, a photograph, something picked up during a journey. The value of these objects does not necessarily lie in their material. It lies in the memory they awaken. A shell once exchanged between two people might become a symbol of their relationship. A necklace of shells might remind someone of a ceremony. A piece of jewelry might be passed from one generation to another, and at that point, the shell no longer belongs only to one individual. It becomes part of collective memory. This is where we can cautiously connect the idea to Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. Jung proposed that beneath individual experience exist deeper psychological structures, expressed through symbols and images that can carry powerful meaning across human cultures. However, we do not need to describe every seashell as an archetype, in the strict Jungian sense, to appreciate its symbolic power. What matters more is recognizing a fundamental human tendency. We transform ordinary objects into carriers of meaning. A shell can represent the sea. The sea can represent vastness. Vastness can evoke the unknown, and the unknown can awaken both fear and curiosity within us. Perhaps that is why objects that come from the ocean often possess such a particular fascination. They seem to carry with them the feeling that they have traveled through a world humans can never completely control. But the shell has another layer of meaning: power. In many societies, objects that are rare, beautiful, or difficult to obtain can become markers of status, not necessarily because they are more useful, but because they are harder to possess. If a particular type of shell can only be found in a distant region, owning it may demonstrate that a person has access to far-reaching networks of trade. If jewelry is made from rare materials and appears only during special ceremonies, it can become a marker of social position. And when an object becomes associated with power for long enough, the object itself can become a symbol of power. It creates a fascinating cycle. Scarcity creates value. Value creates status. Status creates symbolism. Symbolism increases value. And human beings continue to give meaning to the object. But slow down for a moment. In the quiet of this night, try looking at the shell differently. It once rested beneath the sea. A living creature once inhabited it. Then that creature disappeared. The shell was carried toward the shore by waves. A human being picked it up. A community noticed it. And over time, it became money, jewelry, a symbol, a memory, power. Nothing about the shell's physical structure alone can fully explain this extraordinary journey. The greatest transformation happened in the meaning human beings gave to it. And this brings us back to our own lives. How many things in your life are also like a seashell? A sentence someone once said to you, a failure, a success, a house, a gift, a photograph, a name. The things themselves may simply be objects or events, but the human mind has the ability to transform them into stories. And sometimes it is the story that determines how we feel about who we are. If someone believes they are a failure, one failure can become a permanent label. If someone believes they are not good enough, one rejection can become evidence supporting that belief. But if we learn to look again, the same event can carry a different meaning, not by denying the past, but by allowing ourselves to tell our story in a more mature language. Perhaps that is one of the deepest gifts psychology can offer us. The shell cannot change the past of the creature that once lived inside it, but human beings can change the way they understand their own past. And so, when you lie down tonight, if there is still something troubling your mind, try placing it down gently. Do not force yourself to solve it. Simply look at it, like looking at a small seashell resting on the sand. Ask yourself, what did this experience once mean to me? What does it mean to me now? And perhaps, is it time to give it a new meaning? Because sometimes, what makes something precious is not the thing itself. It is the story we have placed inside it. And from seashells used as money and jewelry, we are now going to travel deeper into human history. Because if a shell can carry value, it can also become a witness to ancient meals, to migrations, to seasons of fishing, to trade routes, and to civilizations that once existed and then disappeared. Seashells as witnesses to civilizations that have vanished. And as we leave behind the story of shells that once became money, jewelry, and symbols of human identity, let us slow down and walk a little farther toward the coastlines of the distant past. There are places today that appear to be nothing more than low mounds, layers of sediment beneath the grass, or small white fragments of shell scattered through the soil. At first glance, they may seem completely ordinary, but beneath that silence may lie traces of hundreds, even thousands, of years in which people lived, ate, traveled, and exchanged goods with one another. Archaeologists call some of these places shell middens, accumulations of shells, animal bones, charcoal, tools, and other materials left behind by people who lived there over generations. And strangely enough, a pile of discarded shells can sometimes tell us more about a vanished culture than a stone structure that is still standing. Imagine someone living thousands of years ago. They wake as the sun begins to rise. They leave their shelter and walk toward the shallow water, searching for whatever creatures might provide food, perhaps clams, oysters, snails, or other animals living along the coast. After a day of work, they carry the food home. The shells are opened. The meat is eaten, and the empty shells are thrown aside. The next day, the same thing happens. And then the day after that, year after year, generation after generation, those tiny shells begin to accumulate, one layer, then another, and over time, they become a kind of material memory. No one intended to build a museum, and yet, without realizing it, they created one. Thousands of years later, archaeologists can dig through those layers, examine what remains, and begin asking questions. How did these people live? What did they eat? What seasons did they come here? How far did they travel? Who did they trade with? This is one of the beautiful things about archaeology. The past does not always speak through words. Sometimes, it speaks through the things people left behind. A piece of pottery, a stone, a bone, a seed, and a seashell. Within a shell midden, researchers may find many different kinds of shells alongside fish bones, bird bones, animal remains, charcoal, stone tools, and other traces of human activity. From these materials, they can reconstruct parts of an ancient community's diet and environment. But the shell does not simply tell us, they ate this. It can also lead to deeper questions. Why were they eating it here? If a particular shellfish species appears mainly during a certain season, its presence in an archaeological layer may help researchers determine when people were using that location. If the types of shells change over time, those changes may reflect shifts in the environment or in the way humans exploited available resources. Perhaps one species was once extremely abundant near the coast. Then, several centuries later, it became much less common. What happened? Did the environment change? Did the climate shift? Was the species overharvested? Or did the community simply begin relying on another source of food? Each layer of soil is like a page in a book, but this is a book without words, and archaeologists must learn how to read it. There is something especially meaningful about looking at these layers of shells. They remind us that ancient people did not live separately from their environment. They depended on the tides, on the seasons, on fish, on shallow waters, on everything the ocean could provide. Their lives were organized around the rhythms of nature. And this brings us back to an idea that resonates with Carl Jung. Human beings have always lived in relationship with a world larger than themselves. We often imagine ourselves as independent individuals, but beneath the surface, we are still shaped by our environment, our communities, our memories, and rhythms that we are not always consciously aware of. Ancient people listened to the tides. We listen to the sound of phone notifications. They watched the seasons of fish. We watch our work calendars. They searched for food according to the seasons. We can buy food from supermarkets throughout the year. The world has changed, but the need to adapt to our environment remains. And the seashell is one small piece of evidence that allows us to see that connection. Something even more fascinating happens when a seashell is discovered far from the sea. Imagine an archaeologist uncovering a marine shell at a site deep inland. There is no ocean nearby, no beach, no tide. So why is the shell here? Perhaps someone carried it there. Perhaps it was traded. Perhaps it was jewelry. Perhaps it was used as material for a tool. Or perhaps it once held special meaning. A single small shell can open a story about networks of connection far larger than the place where it was found. Someone living deep inland may have possessed an object that originated from the sea. That means there was once a pathway between two worlds. People traveled. Goods were exchanged. Information moved. Communities encountered one another. The shell becomes a tiny dot on the map of the past. And if researchers discover similar shells at multiple locations, they may begin reconstructing ancient trade networks. One region may have provided salt. Another may have supplied stone. Another may have provided marine shells. And people exchanged these materials with one another. This reveals something beautiful. Human beings were connected to one another long before the internet, highways, or airplanes. A shell may have traveled hundreds of kilometers. It may have passed through many hands, through many communities, through many stories, before finally coming to rest inside a layer of soil. And thousands of years later, an archaeologist picks it up. Perhaps no one will ever know exactly how many hands that shell passed through. But it is still there, a silent witness. And when we think about this through the perspective of Jung, something becomes especially worth considering. Human beings do not merely transmit materials, we transmit meaning. An object being exchanged may carry far more than its physical value. It can carry beliefs, customs, aesthetic preferences, symbols, ways of understanding the world. So when two communities exchanged goods, they may also have been exchanging fragments of their cultures. A marine shell found deep inland may suggest that two distant worlds once touched. A piece of jewelry with an unfamiliar design may reveal influence from another culture. A new craft technique may appear after contact between communities. And gradually, the outlines of an ancient cultural network begin to emerge, not through lines drawn on a map, but through tiny objects buried beneath the earth. Perhaps this is why shell middens can feel so strangely moving. They are not palaces, not pyramids, not enormous statues. They are made from the most ordinary things. What people ate, what they discarded, what they used every day. And sometimes, those ordinary things survive longer than the people who once used them. A person can disappear, a house can collapse, a language can become forgotten, but a seashell can remain buried in the earth for thousands of years. It waits, without speaking, without moving, until one day, someone finds it, and suddenly, the past has another chance to speak. Tonight, as you lie down and imagine the slow rhythm of waves moving toward the shore, try to imagine what might exist beneath that sand. Perhaps there are countless stories that have never been told. Someone once stood there. A child once picked up a shell. A family once sat beside a fire. A community once waited for the tide to retreat. Someone once carried a shell from the sea deep into the interior. They never knew that thousands of years later, a stranger would discover a trace of their existence. But they left something behind that time could not completely erase. A trace. And perhaps we are like that too. We often imagine that our lives are too small to matter within the vastness of time. But every action leaves some kind of trace. A word. A memory. A way we treated another person. A small act of kindness. We may never know how far it will travel. But like a shell carried by the waves, something small can sometimes cross distances we will never see. And as the dawn of history slowly emerges through these layers of shells, we begin to realize that the ocean does not only preserve life, it also preserves the footprints of human beings. But the story does not end here. Because if seashells can tell us about communities that once lived beside the sea, then fossilized shells can take us much farther, beyond human history, beyond the first civilizations, beyond the earliest chapters of our species, back to ages when human beings did not yet exist. At that point, shells will no longer be witnesses to a vanished civilization. They will become witnesses to an ancient Earth itself, fossil shells and the oceans that disappeared. And from the shells that once lay beside ancient human communities, we can take one more step deeper into the memory of Earth itself. Because some shells do not merely tell us about humans, they tell us about a world that disappeared long before humanity ever existed. A world of ancient oceans, vast seas that once covered places that are now plains, deserts, and even mountain ranges. It is strange to imagine that when we stand on dry, barren land and see only rocks, sand, or silent mountain slopes, that same place may once have been beneath a deep ocean. But Earth has never stood still. Continents move, seas advance and retreat, mountains rise, rocks are eroded, and materials that once rested on the ocean floor can eventually appear on land, carrying traces of a world we can no longer see. Imagine someone walking through a mountain landscape. All around them are rocks, trees, and an enormous open sky. Then suddenly, they notice a spiral shape, preserved inside the stone, a perfect curve, resembling a shell. But this shell is not lying on a beach. It is embedded in a mountainside, hundreds of kilometers from the modern ocean. That moment is like opening a door through time. Because a fossil does not simply tell us, this organism once existed. It can also tell us, this place was once part of a very different world. And that is what makes fossilized shells so extraordinary. A fossil shell can become a fragment of an ancient map of Earth. In geology, marine fossils found in rocks on land provide important evidence that the environment of a particular place was once very different from what we see today. Ancient seas could extend across regions that are now deserts or high plateaus. Over millions of years, plate tectonics could uplift layers of rock, while erosion gradually removed the material above them. Eventually, organisms that once lived beneath the sea could emerge high above the modern coastline. This forces us to change the way we think about time. Humans usually measure time in days, months, and years. A human lifetime already feels long. A century feels distant. 1,000 years can be almost impossible to visualize. But Earth operates on a scale of millions and billions of years. On that timescale, an entire civilization is little more than a brief moment. A mountain can rise. An ocean can disappear. A landscape can be buried. A species can emerge and later become extinct. And all of these things can happen over spans of time so enormous that the human mind can barely comprehend them. Perhaps this is also where the perspective of Carl Jung becomes especially interesting. Jung was deeply interested in layers of memory beneath conscious awareness. For him, the human mind was not made only of the things we consciously remember. There are also images, symbols, and patterns that exist at deeper levels, much like geological layers beneath the surface. And when we look at a fossil, we can feel something strangely similar. The surface of Earth is the present, but beneath it lies the past. A layer of rock beneath our feet may contain a story older than any written book. A fossil preserved within that rock is almost like a memory transformed into stone. It does not speak in language, yet it still tells a story. One of the most famous characters in this story is the ammonite. These ancient marine animals had distinctive coiled shells. They existed across enormous spans of geological time and left behind a rich fossil record. Today, the spiral form of an ammonite can look almost like a work of art intentionally designed by a human hand. But behind that beauty lies the history of an entire lineage of organisms that once lived in ancient oceans. Each fossil ammonite reminds us that the oceans once contained inhabitants completely different from those we know today. They moved through a world without humans. No ships, no cities, no artificial lights, only seawater, currents, sunlight filtering through the depths, and countless organisms competing to survive. Then time passed. Generations appeared. Evolutionary lineages changed. Some disappeared. Shells fell to the seafloor. They were buried. Minerals moved through them. Sediments hardened into rock. And eventually, millions of years later, part of that ancient world was lifted back onto the surface. But ammonites were not the only witnesses. There were also trilobites, ancient marine arthropods with segmented bodies and hard external coverings. They inhabited ancient oceans long before disappearing completely from Earth. When we look at a trilobite fossil, it can be easy to feel as though we are looking at a creature from another planet. But it did not come from another planet. It came from our own Earth, just a very different Earth. An Earth we have never personally seen. Perhaps this is one of the deepest lessons fossils can teach us. The world we call normal is only one moment in the history of the planet. We see oceans, continents, mountains, and skies as though they have always existed in their present forms, but they have been changing continuously. The place where you are standing may once have been the bottom of an ocean. The land where you live may once have been near an ancient coastline. A mountain range may once have rested beneath thousands of meters of seawater, and a tiny fossil can provide evidence for all of it. That is why geologists do not study only the shape of a fossil. They study where it was found, the rock layer containing it, the age of that layer, the other fossils found nearby, its chemical composition, the structure of the surrounding sediments. All of these pieces are assembled like fragments of an enormous puzzle. A single fossil may tell one sentence, but thousands of fossils, combined with geological evidence, can tell an entire chapter in the history of a planet. Sometimes, they can even help scientists reconstruct ancient environments. Some fossil organisms lived only under particular conditions. Their presence in a layer of rock can therefore provide clues about the environment that existed when that layer formed. Was the water shallow or deep? Was the sea warm or cold? Was the environment rich in oxygen or oxygen poor? Was it close to shore or far offshore? All of these questions can begin with remarkably small traces. A shell becomes a kind of compass through time. It helps us navigate a world we can never return to. And when we look at it this way, it becomes difficult not to feel a deep sense of humility. Humans often have a tendency to imagine ourselves at the center of history. But fossils remind us that history is far larger than us. There were countless worlds before ours, and there will be countless changes after ours, not necessarily because another planet must appear, but because Earth will continue to transform whether humanity remains here or not. The oceans we know today will eventually change. The coastlines we recognize will eventually shift. The organisms living today may one day become the fossils of tomorrow. And in some unimaginably distant future, another creature may stand upon a layer of rock, discover traces of our existence, and wonder who once lived here. When we think about it that way, we can feel a strange connection with organisms that disappeared millions of years ago. We are also part of the flow, born, living, changing, and eventually leaving traces behind. Tonight, as you prepare to drift into sleep, Imagine that beneath the ground where you are lying there may be layers of history invisible to your eyes. An ancient ocean, a vanished shoreline, a creature that once moved through those waters, a shell that once protected its fragile body, and then millions of years of silence. Perhaps that is the most beautiful thing about fossils. They remind us that disappearance does not necessarily mean the end of a story. A creature may disappear from the ocean, yet its shape can remain preserved in stone. An ocean may vanish from the map, yet its memory can remain inside a mountain. And a tiny shell can become a witness to an earth that no human being ever saw. So the next time you encounter a fossil, try looking at it for a little longer. Do not see only the remains of something that is gone. See a fragment of the planet's memory, because perhaps, within those small curves, Earth is quietly telling its own story. A story that began long before we appeared, and that will continue long after we leave the stage of time. And from those vanished ancient oceans, we can now move into an even deeper story. The story of tiny organisms that helped create the rocks, beaches, and landscapes upon which we stand today. The tiny creatures that built mountains and beaches, and from the ancient oceans that left their memories behind in fossils. We can take one more step into a truth that seems almost paradoxical. Sometimes, the greatest things on Earth are built by creatures so small that the human eye can barely see them. When we stand before a massive limestone cliff, a coral island, or a white beach stretching beneath the moonlight, we often think of these landscapes as things that have existed for an unimaginably long time, almost as if they were born with the planet itself. But if we look deeper, we discover that behind those enormous structures are millions, even billions of tiny organisms that lived, built, died, and left behind microscopic layers of material. One of the most remarkable characters in this story is the foraminifer, a microscopic, single-celled organism capable of leaving traces large enough to contribute to the geological history of an entire planet. Imagine a creature so small that you cannot see it with your naked eye. It has no skeleton like a human, no massive body like a whale, no claws or frightening teeth. Yet during its short life, it can create a tiny mineral shell. Then, when it dies, that shell sinks toward the seafloor. One, then another, then millions, billions. Time passes. They accumulate. One layer settles over another, and things that were once almost invisible begin to become part of enormous deposits of sediment. This is one of the things that makes the natural world so extraordinary. Power does not always come from size. A tiny organism does not need to be powerful in the way we normally imagine power. It only needs to live according to its nature. Repeat that process across countless generations, and allow time to do the rest. Foraminifera are a beautiful example of this principle. Many species of foraminifera produce shells, or tests, composed largely of calcium carbonate. After the organism dies, these mineral structures can become part of marine sediments. Over immense geological periods, carbonate material can accumulate, become compacted, and undergo geological transformation, contributing to the formation of carbonate rocks, including many types of limestone. If you look at a piece of limestone with the naked eye, you may see nothing more than a pale-colored rock, but look at it under a microscope, and the story changes completely. Inside, there may be countless traces of organisms that once lived in the sea. Tiny shapes, small chambers, delicate structures, fragments of an ancient ocean. A rock that appears lifeless may actually be a kind of graveyard of ancient life. And suddenly, we can begin to see Earth in an entirely different way. A mountain of rock is not simply rock. A beach is not simply sand. A coral island is not simply a piece of land in the middle of the ocean. They can be the result of processes of life and death continuing across spans of time far beyond the imagination of a single human lifetime. If we look at this through the spirit of Carl Jung, it becomes a beautiful image of how tiny, unconscious processes can gradually create something much larger than themselves. Jung once wrote, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." A small thing with meaning can be more valuable than something enormous but empty. Perhaps we can look at these tiny ocean organisms in the same way. They do not know that they are helping build mountains. They do not know that their shells will become part of rocks. They simply live. They perform their natural functions. And then, across millions of generations, those tiny actions accumulate into something immense. Human beings are not so different. A life is rarely created by one extraordinary moment. It is built from very small things. A word, a choice, a habit, the way we treat another person, a thought we repeat, a decision we make each day. We often want to see enormous results immediately, but nature rarely works that way. Nature is patient. The ocean is patient. Stone is patient. And time is the greatest builder of all. Think about limestone. One small layer of sediment does not create a mountain. One carbonate shell does not create a cliff. But when millions of tiny layers accumulate over enough time, they can become enormous geological structures. This is why geologists can read rocks almost like books. Sedimentary layers can preserve traces of ancient marine environments. Chemical compositions can provide clues about environmental conditions. Fossils can reveal which organisms once lived there. And all of these small pieces can come together to create a much larger picture of Earth's history. But the story does not end with rock, because one of the most fascinating things about carbonate material is that it does not remain in one form forever. It can be created, moved, broken apart, ground down, and reused. Look at coral reefs. They are built by countless tiny marine organisms over long periods of time. But when coral structures are broken down by waves, marine organisms, and weathering, carbonate material can become smaller and smaller particles. And here we encounter another surprising character, the parrotfish. These fish do more than simply live among coral reefs. Some species use powerful jaws to scrape and grind material from reef surfaces. The mineral material they process can eventually pass through their digestive systems and be released as very fine sediment. In a poetic sense, a parrotfish can help transform part of a coral reef into sand. That means a white grain beneath your feet may not simply be a fragment of rock. It may be the final result of an incredibly long chain of events. An organism produces carbonate. A coral reef grows. Waves break the structure apart. A fish grinds the material. Currents transport the tiny particles. They accumulate along the shore, and eventually, you step on them. It is strange to think that what we call a beach can actually be part of a gigantic natural recycling system. No factory, no assembly line, no workers. And yet countless organisms are continuously creating, breaking down, transporting, and recycling matter. The ocean is like an enormous circulating system. Life creates material. Material returns to the environment. The environment provides raw material for life again. Nothing truly disappears completely. It simply changes form. A shell can become sediment. Sediment can become rock. Rock can be weathered. Material can return to the sea, and from there, part of it can once again become useful to another living organism. It is an endless cycle, and if we look at it through Jung's lens, perhaps we can recognize a profound symbol of human life within it. We are constantly changing too. Experiences that once caused us pain can become maturity. Failures can become understanding. Things that seem to have ended can become raw material for a new chapter. No experience is necessarily meaningless if we are patient enough to understand what it has given us. Just as a tiny shell cannot know that it may one day become part of a rock, we cannot know how a small action today might influence our lives years from now. Perhaps you are trying to change a habit. Perhaps you are learning how to love yourself. Perhaps you are trying to let go of something that has occupied your mind for far too long. Do not underestimate small progress. Nature has spent millions of years demonstrating that tiny things, when repeated long enough, can create something enormous. A grain of sand is not a beach, but millions of grains of sand can become a beach. One shell is not a cliff, but countless layers of accumulated material can contribute to entire geological formations. One act of kindness does not transform the whole world, but millions of acts of kindness can transform a community. And one small choice today can become the foundation of an entirely different person tomorrow. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine a beach beneath the moonlight. No voices, no artificial lights, only the slow movement of the waves flowing toward the shore and retreating again. Beneath the water are countless mineral grains. Some may once have been part of living organisms. Some may once have belonged to a coral reef. Some may have traveled through thousands or millions of years of transformation. And now they rest beside one another, without competing, without rushing, simply continuing their journey. From life into matter, from matter into stone, from stone into sand, and from sand, one day, perhaps, into the raw material of another form of life. Perhaps this is the gentle lesson the ocean offers us. Nothing is truly too small to matter. A tiny organism can help build a coral reef. A layer of sediment can preserve the memory of an ancient ocean. A single grain of sand can represent the final stage of a journey lasting millions of years. And one ordinary human being, living for only a brief moment in Earth's history, can still create changes far greater than they may ever see. So if today you feel that you have not accomplished anything great, be gentle with yourself. You do not have to build an entire mountain tonight. You only need to place one more small stone on your path. Tomorrow, another. And the day after that, another. Because sometimes the greatest structures are not created by one extraordinary act. They are created by countless small things, repeated patiently over time. And as the sound of the waves gradually fades into the night, perhaps we can let our minds rest with one simple thought. You do not have to become something great right now. You only need to keep living, keep growing, keep leaving your small traces behind. Because time, like the ocean, has a remarkable way of transforming the smallest things into part of a much larger story. The extraordinary life cycle of a seashell. And after exploring the tiny creatures that can help build entire beaches and layers of rock across the earth, let us pause for a moment beside something that seems completely ordinary. A seashell. Perhaps you have picked up a shell on the beach before, held it in the palm of your hand, looked at its spirals, its streaks of color, the tiny cracks across its surface, and then placed it back onto the sand. It is so light that it seems almost weightless. And yet, if you look at it a little longer, that shell begins to resemble a book without words, telling the story of an extraordinary life cycle that we often walk past without noticing. It was once part of a living creature. It was once a home, a suit of armor, a boundary between the fragile life inside and the vast world outside. Then that creature died, and the shell remained. But its story did not end. It simply entered another chapter. When it is alive, a mollusk continually builds its shell, using materials available in its environment. Its body produces layers of minerals, gradually expanding the home it carries throughout its life. The shell is not merely an external object. It is a record of growth preserved in mineral form. Each growth line may mark a stage of life. Each new layer is evidence that the creature inside is still alive, still growing, still adapting to its environment. There is something deeply beautiful about this. The creature is not born with a perfectly finished shell and then simply lives inside it forever. It builds its shelter little by little, day after day, one layer following another, a little material today, a little more tomorrow, until, eventually, a complete structure takes shape. Seen through the lens of Carl Jung, this image can become a beautiful symbol of the human experience. We also build our own shells throughout our lives. Our experiences, memories, beliefs, habits, and lessons create layers of protection around the psyche. When we are young, we do not yet know exactly who we are, but over time, we gradually develop an identity, a way of seeing the world, and an image of ourselves that we use to move through society. Jung called one part of the social image we wear the persona, the social mask that helps us adapt to the world. That mask is not necessarily false. It can be necessary. Just as a shell protects a creature from the outside world, the persona helps us understand how to behave in different situations. We are one person at work, another around our family, and perhaps a very different person when we are completely alone in a quiet room. But there is something important that Jung encourages us to remember. Do not mistake the shell for the entire being inside it, because one day, the shell can become too hard, too heavy, too familiar, and we may forget that behind it, an entire inner world is still alive. This makes the life cycle of a shell feel like a profound psychological story. It is created to protect, but eventually, the life inside it comes to an end. The creature dies. The shell remains. And this is the moment we usually call an ending. But nature does not see death in quite the same way we do. In nature, the end of one thing is often the raw material for the beginning of another. The shell is no longer the home of its original creature, but it may become shelter for another. A hermit crab may move into it. A small organism may use it as protection. Algae may attach themselves to its surface. Microorganisms may make it their home. The shell has lost its original function, but it has not lost its value. It has simply changed its role. And then the waves begin their slow work. One wave, then another, day after day, month after month, year after year. The shell strikes against rocks. Sand wears it down. Currents carry it from one place to another. Its sharp edges gradually become smooth. The patterns that were once so distinct slowly begin to disappear. An object that once had a complete and recognizable form gradually breaks into smaller pieces. From the perspective of a human lifetime, the process seems almost impossibly slow. But the Earth's sense of time is different from ours. To the ocean, thousands of years are only a brief pause. The shell continues to break down. A fragment becomes smaller fragments. Those fragments become sediment grains. And eventually, part of the shell may become sand. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful images to contemplate before falling asleep. Imagine that a grain of sand beneath your feet was once part of a complete seashell. It once had a shape. It once had a purpose. It once protected a living creature. But now it is no longer that shell. It has become part of a beach. And when we look at it this way, we begin to understand that change does not necessarily mean loss. Sometimes, change simply means becoming part of something larger. A shell disappears and becomes sand. Sand accumulates into sediment. Over time, sediment can become compressed and transformed into rock. Rock can be uplifted, weathered, carried back toward the sea. And the material that once belonged to the original shell continues to participate in new cycles. It is a cycle without a true ending. And this brings us to a deeply human question. If everything changes, then what remains? Perhaps the answer does not lie in form. A shell cannot keep its shape forever, and neither can a human being remain the same version of themselves forever. We change with age. We change through love, through loss, through failure, through the moments when we begin again. The person you were 10 years ago may no longer exist in exactly the same form within you today, but that does not mean that person has completely disappeared. Their experiences have become part of who you are. Just as an old shell becomes sediment, our past can become the foundation of our present. Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Perhaps becoming who we truly are does not mean discovering one fixed version of ourselves and holding onto it forever. Perhaps it is a continuous process of changing, removing the layers that no longer serve us, understanding the parts of ourselves that have been hidden, and gradually moving closer to the deepest self within. Just like the shell, it does not resist change. It moves through change. From a home to a fragment, from a fragment to sand, from sand to sediment, from sediment to rock, and through the long cycles of the earth. That material may eventually return to the sea. No stage is completely meaningless. Even breaking apart can be part of a much larger life cycle. Tonight, as you lie down and allow your mind to gradually slow, imagine a seashell lying alone on the beach. The waves gently move toward it. Touch it, then retreat. There is no hurry. Nothing is being forced to remain. The shell does not fight the ocean. It simply rests there and allows time to do its work. Perhaps we can learn something from it. There are things in life we have tried to hold on to for too long. An old version of ourselves, a memory, a relationship, a pain, a belief that once helped us survive but has now become too small for who we are becoming. We often fear letting go because we believe that if something disappears, we will lose a part of ourselves. But nature tells a different story. The shell does not need to preserve its original shape in order to remain meaningful. It can dissolve, it can break, it can become part of something else. And so can we. The end of one chapter does not mean the end of the entire story. One version of you disappearing does not mean that you disappear. Sometimes, in order to grow, we have to allow an old part of ourselves to return to the past, to let the things that once protected us finally rest, to allow the layers of hardness that were once necessary to soften, and to make room for a new form to emerge. Because in the end, the shell does not truly disappear. It returns to the ocean in another form, and perhaps human beings are the same. We come from this world. We live within it. We change along with it. And eventually, what we leave behind, memories, love, acts of kindness, and the small influences we have on others, continues to exist within the people and the world we once touched. So tonight, you do not need to be afraid of the changes happening in your life. Let them unfold slowly. Allow yourself to rest. Let the things that have grown old return gently to the past. And if some part of you is breaking apart, remember, not every kind of breaking is an ending. Sometimes, it is simply the way an old shell becomes sand. And from those grains of sand, a new beach may one day take shape. Someday, beneath a different sky, beside a different ocean, a new creature may find shelter, and the cycle will begin again, from life to death, from death to transformation, and from transformation back to the ocean. The secrets of the beach, written in shells and sand. When night falls over the shore, everything seems to slow down. The waves no longer carry the same strength they had during the day. The last light of the sun retreats from the water, and the sand lies quietly beneath a sky filled with stars. If you stood there long enough, you might feel as though the beach were completely silent. But in truth, it has never been silent. Beneath that peaceful surface is a world that is constantly moving. Sand shifts with every wave. Shells collide with one another. Currents sort them according to their size and weight. And the wind slowly rewrites the shape of the shoreline. A beach is like a vast book in which every wave turns another page. And the strange thing is that these stories are not written with ink. They are written with shells, sand, water, and time. We often think of sand as nothing more than tiny grains scattered across a beach. But if we look more closely, sand can be made of fragments of rock, minerals, coral, biological material, and even pieces of shells that have been broken down over time. Each grain once belonged to another place, another moment, perhaps even another living creature. As waves carry these grains toward the shore and pull them back again, their movement is not entirely random. The water is quietly performing a remarkably delicate task, sorting this miniature world. Heavier materials are generally more difficult to carry away than lighter grains. Large, dense shells, or shells with unusual shapes, may settle in different areas from smaller and thinner fragments. As waves retreat, currents carry some materials away. As waves advance, they bring other materials back toward the shore. Thousands, even millions, of repetitions gradually create different zones of the beach, each with its own mixture of grain sizes, materials, and shapes. No one is controlling it. There is no map. No human hand is arranging everything. Only gravity, water, wind, and time. And that is precisely what makes a beach so extraordinary. After a storm, you may see something that is difficult to notice on an ordinary day. Lines of shells may appear along the shoreline, almost as though someone had drawn them by hand. In some places, a long white line stretches for hundreds of meters. In others, shells gather into small clusters. And sometimes, pieces of wood, seaweed, stones, and shells are left together along a distinct boundary. It resembles a trace of memory. The storm has passed, but the beach still remembers it. That memory is not preserved in words. It exists in the position of the shells, the height of the sand, and the lines of material left behind by the water. Seen through the eyes of Carl Jung, this creates a beautiful image of the human mind. We also carry our own lines of shells, traces left behind by the storms of our lives. A breakup, a failure, a loss, a moment that forced us to grow up too quickly. Those events may have happened long ago, but their traces can still remain somewhere within the mind. Jung was deeply interested in the way experiences that are not fully conscious can continue to exist beneath the surface of the psyche. Just as a beach does not need to remember a storm in the way a human being remembers, yet still preserves traces of it, the mind can hold on to experiences we believe we have forgotten. Sometimes, all it takes is a sound, a scent, a place, a very simple sentence, and suddenly, an old memory returns, as if a wave has just touched the sand and revealed a shell that had been buried beneath it. And there is something else that is fascinating. Among countless shells carried away by waves, crushed into fragments, or buried deep beneath the sand, the shells we find still intact on the beach can be thought of as the survivors of a long journey. They have endured impact. They have been carried by currents. They may have struck rocks. They may have been used by other creatures. And yet, somehow, they remain intact enough to rest on the sand and be discovered by someone passing by. This does not mean that intact shells are necessarily the strongest. Their shape, thickness, structure, and circumstances all play important roles. But when we find a complete shell, we are looking at the final result of countless interactions with its environment. It is like a person who has lived through many difficult experiences and yet has managed to preserve a part of their gentleness, not because they were never hurt, but because they learned how to live with their wounds. And then, if you pick up the shell and hold it against your ear, you may hear a strange sound, a very soft humming, a sound that seems almost like the ocean itself is inside the shell. Since childhood, many of us have been told that the shell is holding the sound of the sea, but the reality is even more interesting. A shell acts somewhat like a resonance chamber. Its curved shape can alter and amplify certain components of the sounds in the surrounding environment. The air inside and outside the shell interacts in ways that create a distinctive sound our ears perceive as a gentle hum, or something resembling the sound of waves. And there is something beautiful about this. When we hold a shell to our ear, we are not actually hearing an ocean trapped inside it. We are hearing the world around us transformed by the shell. The sound of the room, the hum of an air conditioner, the movement of the wind, the tiny fluctuations of the surrounding air, all of them can be emphasized by the shell in a particular way. And when viewed through Jung's lens, this becomes a beautiful metaphor. There are moments when we believe an emotion comes entirely from the outside world. But what we feel is often a combination of the external world and the inner structure of our own psyche. The same sentence. One person may hear something ordinary, another may hear something painful. The same rain. One person may feel peaceful, another may feel lonely. The outside world is the same, but the resonance chamber inside each person is different. So sometimes, the question we need to understand is not, why is the world making me feel this way? But, what inside me is resonating with this world? Perhaps it is a memory, a fear, a desire, a part of ourselves that we have not listened to for a very long time. Tonight, as you prepare to sleep, imagine yourself walking slowly along an empty beach. You do not need to search for anything, just walk. Each step makes the sand sink beneath your feet, before slowly settling back into place. A wave moves toward the shore, then retreats. One shell remains, another disappears beneath the water. Nothing remains still forever. And perhaps that is the secret the beach has been trying to tell us. Everything leaves a trace, but no trace lasts forever. Storms eventually pass. Lines of shells are eventually erased by waves. Footprints in the sand eventually disappear, and the things that once caused us pain can slowly become part of the past. But just as the beach retains a small memory of every wave, our souls also retain traces of what we have experienced, not so that we can remain trapped in the past, but so that we can remember that we once passed through it. And if one day you feel completely exhausted, remember the little shell resting on the sand. It does not need to fight the ocean. It only needs to exist within its flow. Waves come, waves go. Sand moves, time passes, and the shell continues telling its story through silence. Perhaps we can do the same. We do not need to solve everything tonight. We do not need to understand every part of ourselves. We do not need to know where tomorrow will take us. We only need to allow the mind to rest, to let the waves inside us become quieter, and to let the unfinished things lie peacefully upon the beach of the soul. Because sometimes, when we stop desperately searching for answers, we finally begin to hear the very quiet sound that has been there all along, like the sound of the ocean inside a shell. Not because the ocean is trapped within it, but because the shell helps us hear what was already present around us. And perhaps, in the quietness of this night, you too can hear something similar within yourself. When the ocean changes, shell-bearing creatures must fight to survive. And now that we have listened together to the sound of the waves, watched shells being arranged along the sand, and imagined the long journeys they have traveled, perhaps it is time to enter a quieter story. Because the ocean we often imagine as an unchanging world, vast, deep, and seemingly powerful enough to embrace everything, is actually in a constant state of change. Temperature changes, ocean currents change, the chemistry of seawater changes, and when those changes occur, even the smallest creatures must adapt. For some shell-bearing species, these changes are especially important because the shell is not merely a home, it is part of their ability to survive. Imagine a tiny creature drifting through the ocean. It has no voice, no hands with which to resist environmental changes, no way of knowing that the chemistry of the water around it is gradually shifting, yet its body must still respond. Every day, it tries to build, repair, and maintain the shell that has protected it since the earliest stages of its life. And then something invisible begins to happen. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As the amount of carbon dioxide increases, some of that gas dissolves into seawater and participates in chemical reactions that alter the ocean's pH. This is one of the main mechanisms behind what scientists call ocean acidification. Importantly, acidification does not mean that the entire ocean suddenly becomes a strongly acidic liquid. Rather, seawater becomes less alkaline, and even relatively small changes in its chemistry can have significant consequences for certain organisms, especially for creatures that require calcium carbonate to build their shells. Under certain chemical conditions, the availability of carbonate ions in seawater can decrease. When that happens, forming and maintaining calcium carbonate can become more difficult for some species. And this is where the scientific story begins to touch something much deeper about life itself. Because for a shell-bearing creature, building its shell is not an optional task. It is building the place where it will live. Imagine a person waking up every morning and discovering that repairing the roof of their house has become slightly harder than it was the day before. The next day, it becomes a little harder again. There is no single moment when that person suddenly realizes that everything has completely changed. But after many years, the difference becomes unmistakable. Some marine organisms face a similar kind of gradual change. Under certain conditions, shell growth may slow. Maintaining the shell's structure may become more difficult, and the earliest stages of life can be particularly important, because larvae and young organisms are extremely small, physically fragile, and still developing essential structures. Here we can see one of nature's deepest principles. The environment does not have to change dramatically to create dramatic consequences for life. A small change in water, a small change in chemistry, a small change in the rate at which a shell forms. But when those small changes are repeated across countless generations, they can affect an entire population. One organism often mentioned when discussing ocean acidification is the pteropod tiny free-swimming sea snails, sometimes described poetically as sea butterflies. Some pteropod species possess delicate shells made of calcium carbonate. They drift through the ocean, tiny, almost impossibly fragile, and yet they occupy an important position within marine food webs. If environmental conditions make it more difficult to build or maintain their shells, the story does not end with a single pteropod, because in nature, no organism exists completely alone. A small creature may become food for a larger one. That larger creature may then become food for another. Energy moves through the food web like ripples spreading across the surface of water. So when one link is affected, other links may eventually feel the change. And this is when a tiny shell becomes part of a much larger story. It is no longer only the story of a snail. It is not only the story of a shellfish. It becomes the story of an ecosystem. And if we look at this through the lens of Carl Jung, the image creates a beautiful parallel with the human mind. We often imagine ourselves as independent individuals, one person with their own thoughts, one life, one private room. But Jung viewed the human psyche in a much deeper way. Beneath individual consciousness exists a vast world of symbols, memories, connections, and psychological layers that we are not always consciously aware of. Human beings are like creatures living in an ocean. We exist within an environment we cannot completely control. Our families influence us. Our cultures influence us. The people we love influence us. The wounds, beliefs, and stories we encounter from childhood also influence the way we build the shell around ourselves. And just as marine organisms must adapt to the water around them, human beings must adapt to the psychological world in which they live. But there is one important difference. Human beings possess awareness. We can stop. We can observe. We can ask, is the shell I am carrying still necessary? Some defenses once helped us survive the past. But when circumstances change, those same defenses can become the very things that prevent us from living freely. Someone who was once betrayed may learn never to trust anyone again. Someone who was rejected may build a shell of emotional coldness. Someone who was deeply hurt may decide they will never need anyone again. Those shells do not appear without reason. They once served a purpose. Just like the shell of a marine creature, they were created to protect, but a structure designed to protect life must sometimes be adjusted when the environment changes. This is one of the profound lessons nature can offer us. Protecting yourself does not mean becoming immovable. A shell that is too hard is not necessarily a perfect shell. A heart that never allows itself to be hurt may also become a heart that no longer allows itself to love. So the goal is not to live without a shell. It is to know when you need it, and to know when you are safe enough to open. Tonight, if you are listening to these words in a quiet room, imagine the vast ocean beyond your window. You cannot see it, but it is still there, and in the darkness of the deep sea, millions of creatures are still trying to survive, build, adapt, and continue their life cycles. A tiny shell may be forming layer by layer. A young organism may be struggling to survive. A pteropod may be drifting with the current. And the entire world is quietly responding to changes in its environment. There are no loud cries, no warning bells, only tiny changes unfolding day after day. And perhaps that is what makes this story so worth contemplating. Because our lives are much the same. Not every important change arrives through a dramatic event. Sometimes it arrives almost imperceptibly. A little fatigue, a little distance, a little doubt, a little loss of trust, a little loneliness. At first, it may be almost impossible to notice, but if we do not listen, those small changes can accumulate into a vast distance between ourselves and who we truly are. So before you fall asleep, try asking yourself one gentle question. What is the environment inside me like right now? You do not need to answer immediately. You do not need to analyze it. Just listen. Perhaps you need rest. Perhaps some part of you has been forced to appear strong for far too long. Perhaps the shell you built years ago is still protecting you, but it has now become heavy. And if that is true, you do not have to tear it down in a single night. Begin by understanding it, because every shell has a story, and every defense mechanism once had a reason to exist. The ocean teaches us that life does not survive by resisting every change. Life survives by adapting to change, and human beings are no different. We do not need to become invulnerable. We only need enough awareness to understand the environment we are living in, recognize what is affecting us, and know when it is time to change the way we protect ourselves. Outside, the waves are still moving. The ocean is still breathing. Tiny shells are still forming layer by layer beneath the dark water. And within that silence comes a very gentle reminder. You do not have to be strong all the time. You only need to keep living, keep adapting, keep listening, and allow yourself to soften when the time is right. Because even the most fragile shells are doing their best to survive in a world that is always changing. And perhaps, in our own way, so are we. The final secrets hidden on the surface of a shell. And now, after traveling through almost the entire journey of shells from the moment they are formed, growing layer by layer, recording changes in the ocean, enduring waves and storms, becoming sand, and eventually returning to the sea, perhaps it is time to lean closer and look at the seemingly silent surface of a shell. If you place one gently in the palm of your hand beneath soft light, you may notice tiny ridges, scratches, patches of color, and unusual markings that are easy to overlook at first. But in the natural world, almost no detail is completely meaningless. A scar may be the trace of an attack. A growth line may record a difficult period. A layer of algae covering the surface may transform the shell into a shelter for an entire miniature community. And sometimes, a shell may have such an unusual shape that we are forced to wonder. How many stories has nature written onto an object that human beings see only as something beautiful on the shore? Let us begin with wounds. During the life of a shell-bearing creature, the shell is not always perfectly intact. It may be attacked by a predator, struck against rocks, subjected to environmental stress, or damaged during growth. What is remarkable is that, in many cases, the shell can repair at least part of the damage by continuing to produce new material. The wound does not simply disappear. It may remain as a mark within the structure of the shell, like a tiny sentence written by time through the lens of Carl Jung. This image immediately brings to mind something deeply human. We also carry traces of what we have experienced. Some wounds no longer hurt, yet they still change the way we see the world. Some experiences ended many years ago, yet they continue to influence how we trust, love, and protect ourselves. Just as a shell cannot return to a state in which it was never damaged, human beings cannot live without being touched by their past. But a wound does not necessarily represent weakness. It can be evidence that we were hurt and still continued to grow. Perhaps that is one of the gentlest things a shell can tell us. It does not hide its history. It carries that history on its own body. And then there is another, even more fascinating secret. In nature, some snails display reversed shell coiling or unusual forms of asymmetry, making left-handed individuals extremely rare compared with the more common form of their species. In many cases, this difference is not merely external. The direction in which a shell coils can be connected to the position of internal organs and may even influence the creature's ability to reproduce. A tiny change in direction, a structure that appears almost insignificant, and yet it can create enormous differences in the life of the organism. This reminds us that nature is not built according to one completely rigid template. Diversity can emerge from remarkably small changes. And sometimes, what is rare helps us understand much more deeply how the ordinary system works. A shell can also become a mobile ecosystem. This may be one of the strangest things of all. We look at a shell and imagine that it is a single object. But look closer. Algae may attach themselves to it. Barnacles may use its surface. Sponges may grow upon it. Microorganisms may inhabit tiny crevices. Other small creatures may find food or shelter around it. And if the shell is carried by a hermit crab, that entire little ecosystem may move along with it. A shell, a creature living inside it, organisms attached to its surface, tiny creatures living around them. Together, they form a miniature community moving through the ocean. And this makes us reconsider what we mean by the word individual. In nature, the boundary between an organism and its environment is sometimes far less clear than we imagine. Human beings are similar. We often say, I, as though the self was something completely separate. But the I is shaped by countless relationships, family, friends, memories, culture, people who once loved us, people who once hurt us, places where we once lived, stories we once believed. All of these cling to our inner world, like algae and barnacles clinging to the surface of a shell. And sometimes, to understand ourselves, we need to look not only inward, we also need to look at everything that has lived alongside us. But the shell holds even subtler secrets. Some organisms can detect or respond to light in remarkable ways. Certain structures on shells can produce color through the way light interacts with microscopic structures within the material, rather than simply through pigments. In some species, fluorescence can also be observed under particular lighting conditions. This can make a shell seem almost otherworldly. In daylight, it may appear ordinary, but under a different kind of light, features that are difficult for the naked eye to notice can suddenly become visible. Nature seems to be saying, not every kind of beauty appears under the same light, and perhaps the same can be said of the human soul. There are parts of ourselves that appear only under particular circumstances. Someone may seem incredibly strong in front of the world, yet become gentle when they are with someone they trust. Someone may remain silent in a crowd, yet possess an extraordinary inner world when alone. There are qualities we may not even know we possess until life places us in a situation that calls them forward. Jung devoted considerable attention to those parts of the psyche that exist beyond conscious awareness. For him, the human being was not a simple, transparent entity, but a vast inner world containing both familiar and unexplored regions. In that sense, each of us is somewhat like a shell. The surface is only the beginning. The longer we observe, the more we discover. A crack, a layer of color, an unusual structure, a trace of the past, a part of ourselves we had never noticed before. And eventually, All of these details bring us back to the greatest question. What is a shell, really? It is not merely calcium carbonate, not merely a protective layer, not merely a beautiful object we pick up on the beach. It is the result of an extraordinarily delicate biological and chemical process. The organism must obtain materials from its environment. It must regulate the formation of minerals. It must create a structure strong enough to provide protection while still allowing for growth. Its color, shape, thickness, and patterns can all be influenced by genetics, environment, and development. It is like a structure built not by an architect standing outside it, but by the living body of the organism dwelling within it. And perhaps that is the greatest wonder of all. The shell is built by life, to protect life. But when that life ends, the shell continues into other stories. It may become shelter. It may become the foundation of a miniature ecosystem. It may be crushed by waves into sand. It may become sediment. It may remain inside rock for millions of years. And one day, it may become evidence that allows a future human being to look back into Earth's distant past. So tomorrow, when you see a shell, do not look only at its shape. Try to see what it has endured. A scratch may have been a battle. A layer of color may reflect its environment. A tiny organism attached to its surface may reveal an entire community. An unusual form may tell a story about evolutionary diversity, and a thin layer of mineral may be the result of countless processes unfolding quietly inside a living body. Perhaps we should learn to look at ourselves in the same way. Do not look at your scars and call them flaws. Do not look at your differences and assume they make you less complete. Do not think of everything that happened in the past as something that must simply be forgotten, because sometimes those very marks helped create the shape you have today. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Perhaps becoming yourself does not mean erasing every trace of your past. Perhaps it means understanding them, accepting them, and allowing them to become part of the story you choose to continue writing. Tonight, imagine that shell still resting on the beach. Moonlight gently touches its surface. The waves move forward, then retreat. A thin layer of water passes over its ridges. For a moment, the shell no longer seems like an inanimate object. It feels like a small memory of the ocean, a structure built by life, a home that once had an inhabitant, a surface that endured battles we could never see. And now, it simply rests. It does not need to prove anything. It does not need to be perfect. It simply exists. Perhaps that is also what we need to allow ourselves to do tonight. We do not need to solve every problem. We do not need to become a more perfect version of ourselves. We only need to rest, to lower our defenses a little, to let our memories lie quietly, to allow the mind to stop fighting for a while, because tomorrow will come again. The waves will touch the shore again. Light will fall upon the shells again, and the story of life will continue to be written, one layer at a time, just as it has been written for millions of years. Perhaps we are only tiny shells within the vast ocean of time, but inside each of us is a story that no one else can live in our place. And perhaps simply understanding that is enough reason to gently close our eyes tonight. When the beach becomes a museum of the earth, and now, as we have traveled almost to the end of our journey through the wondrous world of shells, perhaps it is time to pause for a moment by the shore and look at everything through different eyes. No longer simply a stretch of sand beneath the sunlight, no longer just small shells scattered among the waves. If we are patient enough to observe, the beach can reveal itself as a vast museum of the earth, with no glass cases and no explanatory plaques. Yet every grain of sand, every fragment of shell, and every stone preserves a small part of an incredibly long story. Here, biology meets chemistry, chemistry meets geology, geology meets climate, and everything meets time. A tiny shell may begin its story inside the body of a living creature, but that story can eventually become the history of an entire ocean. perhaps even a small part of the history of our planet. The strangest thing is that we often walk through these museums without realizing that we are standing before an enormous archive. A child may pick up a shell simply because it is beautiful. Someone spending a day at the beach may place one in their pocket as a small souvenir to take home. But to a scientist, that shell may contain information about the environment in which its organism once lived. Its chemical composition can provide clues about seawater conditions. Its growth lines may reflect the rhythm of the organism's life. Changes on its surface may reveal difficult periods it experienced. In other words, a shell is a place where life writes its own story into matter, and when the organism dies, that story does not necessarily end. The shell may remain on the seafloor. It may be carried toward the shore by waves. It may be crushed into smaller fragments. Those fragments become part of the sand. The sand becomes sediment. The sediment may be compressed over immense periods of time. Through geological transformations, material that once belonged to a tiny living creature can eventually become part of rock. Then millions of years pass. The ocean may change its position. Sea levels may rise and fall. Places that once lay beneath the sea may become plains, deserts, or mountains. And one day, a human being may discover a fossil preserved in rock, far from the ocean that exists there today. A shell, a tiny trace, yet it may tell us, this place was once the sea. It is difficult to imagine that such an enormous piece of information could be preserved by something so small. Through the lens of Carl Jung, this evokes a particularly profound image of memory. Jung devoted much thought to the relationship between consciousness and the deeper layers of the psyche. There are things we may no longer remember consciously, yet their traces can continue to influence the way we experience the world. Human beings are like landscapes, too. The surface may appear peaceful, but underneath are layers of memories, experiences, fears, joy, things that were said, things that were never said. Each layer becomes part of who we are, and sometimes even the smallest crack can reveal an entire story that has been buried deep within. A shell is the same. A crack on its surface may be evidence of an attack. It may be the result of striking against rocks. It may be a trace left behind by a period of harsh environmental conditions. We see a single crack, but behind that crack is an event. It is like a scar on the human body. A scar does not tell the entire story, but it tells us that a story once happened there. Perhaps we should look at our own scars with that same gentleness. Not every wound needs to be erased. Some wounds simply need to be understood, because they are evidence that we have lived, that we have loved, that we have lost, that we have changed, that we have survived things our former selves once believed we could never overcome. When we look down at the sand, something else becomes astonishing. A grain of sand can be incredibly small, almost too insignificant to notice. Yet a beach is made from countless grains like it, and if we trace their origins backward, we may encounter rocks, minerals, coral, marine organisms, shells, and geological processes that unfolded across periods far beyond the span of a human life. A grain of sand may be tiny, but the history behind it is not. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful lessons the beach can offer us. We often judge something by its size. If it is small, we assume it is unimportant. If it is silent, we assume it has nothing to say. If it is slow, we assume nothing is happening. But nature does not work that way. A microscopic organism can contribute to the formation of enormous layers of rock. A shell can become evidence of an ancient ocean. A layer of sediment can help scientists reconstruct the climate of an age that has long disappeared. A grain of sand can be the final piece of a process that began millions of years ago. And an ordinary human being can be the same. A small act of kindness can change another person's life. A gentle word can remain in someone's mind for decades. A moment we believe means nothing can become an important part of someone else's story. Great things do not always begin with great things. They begin with things that are very small. Just as an ocean is made of countless drops of water, a beach is made of countless grains of sand. A long history is preserved through countless fragments of life, and a human being is shaped by countless moments they have experienced. That is also why the beach can become such a beautiful symbol of the human psyche. On the surface, everything seems simple. A horizon, a stretch of sand, a shell, a wave. But beneath it are depths that the naked eye cannot see. Just like the mind, we may know what we are thinking today, but we do not always know why we became the person we are now. Some things began long before we were mature enough to understand them. Some beliefs were formed during childhood. Some reactions may have originated from experiences we have forgotten. Some parts of the psyche appear only when we enter certain situations. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Those words fit beautifully with the image of the beach. What lies beneath the sand does not disappear simply because we cannot see it. And what lies deep within the mind does not disappear simply because we have never given it a name. Perhaps this is why the journey of understanding ourselves is like a person slowly walking along the shore, picking up one shell after another and asking, "Where did this come from? What story does this crack tell? What shaped it this way? And what has been buried beneath the sand for so long that I have never seen it?" There is no need to find the answers immediately. Sometimes, simply realizing that the questions exist is already a step forward. And now, as our journey through the world of shells slowly comes to an end, let us return to where everything began, the beach at night. Imagine that the sky has grown dark. The sunlight is gone. Only the gentle moonlight rests upon the surface of the water. The waves move toward the shore, then slowly retreat. A shell lies quietly on the sand. Perhaps it was once the home of a living creature. Perhaps it was once damaged. Perhaps it has traveled through hundreds of waves. Perhaps part of it will become sand someday, far in the future. But right now, it simply lies there, silent, peaceful, and if you look at it for long enough, perhaps you will begin to understand that it is not nearly as small as it appears, because within it is the story of life. Within its patterns is time. Within its mineral composition is chemistry. Within its origin is biology. And within its destiny is geology. And along its long journey, it carries the history of the earth. Perhaps that is the final message the shells want to share with us. Do not be too quick to overlook the small things, because sometimes the smallest things are where the greatest stories are preserved. A shell can tell the story of an ocean that disappeared. A grain of sand can carry traces of millions of years. A crack can tell the story of a struggle for survival. And an ordinary human being can carry within them an entire universe of memories, love, loss, and hope. Tonight, let the gentle sound of the waves slowly carry you towards sleep. You do not need to think about anything else. You do not need to search for any more answers. Just listen. The waves come. The waves go. The beach remains. The shells lie quietly. And time continues, silently writing the story of the earth. Perhaps tomorrow, a wave will wash away your footprints in the sand. But that does not mean you were never here. Because in nature, not everything needs to exist forever in order to have meaning. Sometimes, meaning lies simply in the fact that we were once here, that we once lived, that we once loved, that we once touched this world. And just like a tiny shell resting beneath the moonlight, we too are only a very small part of the endless history of the earth. Yet somehow, it is those very small things that create the greatest stories of all. Now, let your eyes close. Let the sound of the waves grow more distant. Let your mind become lighter. And as you drift into sleep, carry with you one final image. A small shell resting quietly on the beach, beneath a sky filled with stars, silently holding within it the story of an entire world. May you have a peaceful night, a deep and restful sleep, and may you wake tomorrow with a lighter mind and a gentler heart.